Yeah, you can.
Recording in progress.
This is just.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January 4th meeting of the Historic District Commission. The board's actions in these matters have been deemed to be quasi-judicial in nature. If any person believes any member of the board has a conflict of interest, that issue shall be raised at this point, or it will be deemed waived. So this is the time of year when we elect new officers. We have to get this out of the way.
I'm going to introduce everybody first, and
Certainly.
then we'll go straight
No,
to
it's
that.
up, you know, I will introduce everybody first. Okay, Joanna Landis.
Hello.
And Dr. Brown.
Good evening.
And Martin Ryan.
Good evening.
Reagan Rudy,
Good evening.
current vice chair, I should say. My name is John Wyckoff. Nick Cracknell.
From the Planning Department, good evening.
From our city council representative, Rich Belayla.
Good evening.
Yep. And Margot Doring
Hello.
and David Adams.
Good evening.
Okay, and so now we'll have the election of officers.
I would like to nominate Mr. Wyckoff again for another year of chairmanship.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All righty. So we've found out that in the past we had what we were preparing for are these kind of secret votes, but we're not supposed to do that, so.
Open.
We'll call.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness,
We'll
you
have to all
can't hear
speak
me? Can you hear me now? That's too close, I'm sorry. Somebody's waving at me here. So I'll call for a voice vote. Roll.
Or,
Yeah?
Any other nominations? Do we do, vice?
Well,
we'll
if,
do vice chair after
Okay. Yeah.
this. Yeah. And this first.
you want to start down there?
I don't, last time you said that because I'm an alternate, I
Yes.
don't vote?
That's correct. Would you like to vote, please?
I vote yes. I approve.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Margot?
No.
No. And I'll vote aye, so that is 6-1 for the record.
Yep.
Now we need vice chair.
I would like to nominate Margot Doring for vice chair. I've very much appreciated being vice chair this year, but I haven't really done anything. And we have a lot of sort of administrative and other projects that we would like to tackle that I just don't have the time to do, but Margot is willing to do it. And so I would like to
Second.
have her step in.
Second that.
All righty. Okay, Dan.
Agreed, approved. Approved.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yeah, you can do it. After all, Kevin McCarthy votes for himself. You know, that's the way it is. So we have just gotten through this little bit of democracy. Now we have the approval of the minutes. That's December 7th and December 14th. Is
I
everyone-
move we approve the minutes as presented.
Well, I have to abstain from December 7th because I was not here.
Okay.
Well, we'll do them separately. December 7th.
I second that approval.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? All right, now we'll do December 14th.
Approve, motion to approve.
Seconded.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against? All right, so we have that. Now we're moving on to item 3, administrative approvals, and as Nick has just informed me, they're all continued to
Next week.
next week, yeah. So do we need a continuance, a motion for continue?
Yeah, you do.
Okay, somebody please.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Public hearings, old business. We have request to postpone 43 Holmes Court LLC. Request to postpone Seacoast Management and Consulting about 3 Walton Alley. And a request to postpone see, Brian Cressy, 46 Mark Street, and these will be to next week.
No, they're all, sorry, the first two, 3 Walton and 43 Holmes are to February,
All right,
and 46 Mark Street will come back next week. There
Okay.
was some confusion on there.
all right. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah, and then there's one more work session.
Right, might as well do the work session for 95 Daniel.
Okay, we'll postpone the work session also for 95-99 Daniel Street.
To February.
February. I was going to do that separately.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I've been asked by a member of the public about what the issue with postponement is, and why some projects seem to be able to be postponed into perpetuity. And I'm wondering if we could at some point be able to wrap our heads around what value there is in postponing over and over and over again.
That's a good question.
Want me to answer that?
Yes, please, Nick.
So we generally have a policy, not a rule, that we will postpone projects for 6 months. Sometimes it's 8, but at 6 months, we start asking serious questions about why they haven't come back. Usually the case for a postponement is based on the need to go to the Board of Appeals or another land use board before they come back here. In the case of 3 Walton, for example, which you brought to my attention, and I've communicated with the abutter that came to you, and that person needs to go get a variance at the BOA for the condenser portion of the application. So she's got to complete that before she can actually have her public hearing here. She started with a public hearing and the condenser moved around. It's in an area that requires a variance now because it's over on the right-hand side, close to the neighbor. So it needs dimensional relief before you can actually hold your hearing. The benefit to the property owner of not simply withdrawing the application and coming back after the BOA is probably the $300 to $500 for the legal ad and the application fee that would need to be reinitiated to come back. And after 6 months, we typically tell people, you've got to withdraw, it's taking too long, and the neighbors can't keep up because they only get noticed at the beginning. And it's incumbent on everybody to see what your postponement date is each month. And so it does get difficult for the abutters to keep up with what's happening.
Not to put words in the mouth of the abutter that spoke to me about this, but wouldn't a regular, normal person think of it as an abuse or a hardship on an abutter to be every single month being told that an issue that they may have some conflict or interest in is going to be up for renewal or whatever, and they have to make sure that they're in town that Wednesday night over and over and over again for months on end, and never knowing when is going to be the real time to have it happen?
Well, I'd say yes, the agenda's set a week before the meeting, which isn't a huge amount of relief, but you don't have to find out the day of the meeting it's being postponed, or you don't have to come to City Hall if you have the ability to get to a computer or your phone and look at the agenda a week before the meeting. It's already noticed that it's going to be continued or postponed.
So I'm going to have to come up with a nice way of saying that it's in your prerogative to be your best defendant or advocate.
Yes.
Okay, I will do so, sir.
Yeah. It's not easy, and I think there are points and counterpoints on both sides. But that's why we try to stick to the 6-month rule, and I know sometimes it's gone 8. We had the State Street project in front of us forever, probably 8 months before we kicked them off. But we don't have a little timer beside it.
It's also, from the outside, it sometimes seems like it could be frivolous for people that don't know the
Understood.
actual pieces and parts
Totally
of what's going on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you, Nick. So, public hearings, old business, a petition of Dagny Taggart, LLC owner for property located at 93 Pleasant Street, wherein permission is requested to allow changes to a previously approved design, raise the rear stairwell and change the siding material, and to temporarily remove existing stone wall and reconstruct after construction as per plans on file in the planning department. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 107 as Lot 74, lies within Character District 4 and Historic District. And who here is presenting this?
Good evening, Tracy Kozak with Arcove Architects here on behalf of the applicant. I'm here tonight with also representatives from McNabb Properties and Severino Construction, the site contractor. If there are additional questions, and Bernie Lee from Severino will be also explaining some of the pages and drawings at the end of this presentation. Just a quick clarification. I think this application is only the stone wall tonight and nothing else.
Yeah, that's all that's left.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So I won't read this verbatim, but the front page, which you see here, describes a little bit about the history of this wall. We have talked a lot about this wall from the very, very first work session as being of utmost importance. We, as you may recall, the original design in one of the first work sessions had the new addition on the back right up to the wall, and at that point the wall was going to be temporarily removed and then put back as a attached veneer to the foundation. That didn't go anywhere. So we came back with a new design where the new building is pushed back a number of feet from the wall to allow us to protect it. And during the course of investigating the wall and the history, as you may read from this narrative, we found that it does in fact date back to one of the earliest periods of the city. The original house that was on this site, it's no longer there, dates back to about 1696, was the home of Senior Thomas Packer, who was the father of the notorious Thomas Packer who executed Ruth Blay. A bunch of other really significant historic stuff happened on that site, mostly in the house that is no longer there. This was in back of it. There was one old map that had the word pound on it at one time. There's not much written about the actual back part of this property. At one point in the Greenleaf maps and deeds subdivide it into agricultural land. It was a farm in the 1700s. The stone wall, though, is unique in its scope and scale and height and length for downtown. It's probably the only one like it that is still remaining. And it does, in its construction and proportions and measurements, it does match what were typically built as stone pounds at that time period. At some point, it was backfilled. There's evidence that it was a freestanding wall on both sides when it was first built. And I don't know exactly when it was backfilled, but it's been a parking lot for a long time. And consequently, the pressure from the earth against that, it wasn't built as a retaining wall, but every now and then it starts leaning and it has to be repaired. And you can see the repairs over the years and centuries that has been required to keep this wall intact. Even as recently as 10 years ago, John Wostrom excavated the back, and they basically pushed it back into place. When doing so, the stones don't fit together as they did when they lean over, so they fill in the new gaps with chinking and new stones. And you'll see from the photos in the packet, it's mostly the old original stones, but there's also a mix of little pieces that were stuck in. There's mortar in some places, and there are some newer stones, which you can see are of a different type of granite. They're split and drilled. They're not the same stone as the original. They're a different color, different texture. That's the wall along the street. These photos are sequential, walking down the sidewalk from west to east. So that first photo is at the driveway that ramps up into the parking lot. And then I took 3 paces for each photo, so that's about 9 or 10 feet of my stride to get to the end. So all the way down Court Street are just close-up photos so you can see the nature of the stone and the work that's been done. There is a side wall that goes perpendicular to Court Street, and it is along the property line between this property and the temple. That is, yep, that starts there. And the same, you can see as we go towards the back of the property, it disappears into the hill. It is falling over, it has fallen apart. At the bottom, there used to be a firehouse down there, so there's a brick remnants of the brick foundation of the firehouse, which are attached to that wall. There's some brick and concrete in some parts. A tree is growing out of it towards the uphill side, and then it sort of disappears. So that is also proposed to be removed and rebuilt, so it's sound. And the last part, on the very, very back of the property, almost adjacent to the back of the Treadwell house, is, that one. That is of a bit of a different nature. It does appear to have some old stones. I brought some close-up photos if you want to look at those.
Certainly.
Currently, that's not holding back earth. It may have been at some point. The Clipper Tavern building is on the other side of it, so it's functioning as a veneer. It's not pretty to look at, like the one on Court Street. It's it's built messy. There's mortar. The stones aren't as regular and big as the ones on front. It's not in great shape. It's different quality. I don't know much about the history of that particular portion of the wall. So, yes.
How far does that back wall go? All the way to the property, or?
No,
Just-
it's just a little bit to the right of where that photo ends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then it transitions to a modern contemporary retaining wall that was built probably when the building behind it was renovated. There's concrete. It's not an old wall. It's a newer wall. All right. So so we had intended to keep this wall, and we redesigned the building to do that. And then when we started getting on site to investigate digging the foundations for the building that is set quite behind it, we found more bedrock than we had expected. And in fact, some of it is contiguous and in fact right underneath this wall. So any excavation, removal of the bedrock will cause vibrations which could jeopardize this wall, and we want to protect it. We looked at shoring it in place and putting supports on either side, but to do that, there are a few issues which are described in here, and Lee can describe a little bit more, requires holding the braces together, which would have to go through the wall. Because this wall is 3 foot deep, is 3 foot at the bottom, it's 4 feet thick, it's 2 to 3 feet at the top. You can't just drill through it without piercing stones. Like the mortar joints don't go straight through. It's a multi-width wall. So that would cause some damage. Also, we need to go under it in 2 locations for street utilities, electric service to the building, and the sewer connection. There's also no footing. There's no frost wall under this wall, which is one of the reasons it moves over time. We feel it would be more stable if we could put a proper 4-foot frost wall underneath this so it doesn't move in winter, and also to reinforce the back structurally so that when it is backfilled, it doesn't keep leaning over and requiring repair.
I have a quick question, please.
Yep.
If there's bedrock, how do you get the utilities under there?
They're drilled, they're cored through with a drill, and Lee can talk a little bit more about that. Drilled through bedrock. Just one last bit on the excavation of the bedrock behind it. The technique won't be blasting. They're trying to minimize the vibrations as much as possible by just using a chipping hammer. But even that will, because it's connected, it still causes continuous vibrations. So with that, there are some plans in the back which show the site plan and where this wall is located, or these walls, where the utilities are located, and on the back are some details. But I'm going, unless there are any questions right now, I will.
Well, let's just see. Does anyone else have any questions? No? I have a question. There was a product that I remember from many years ago when I was more active in this business. And it's a product that after the bedrock has been drilled, that it's placed in there and it expands and breaks the rock. Is that anything that you're considered, or can anyone speak to that?
I'll let Bernie speak to that.
Since we have no other questions from,
I have a quick question.
okay, certainly.
Do we have a section through the wall and how it's going to be
Yep,
rebuilt?
the very last page
Okay,
in this
thank you.
application. So Bernie will describe the actual process and sequence that we propose to temporarily remove this, safely store it, and then how it will be put back in a reinforced, safer condition.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission and Planning. I'm Bernie Lee, a chief estimator at Severino, which I'm sure you're all familiar with our company over the 20 years we worked in the city. To answer, yes, to your question, using a particular material that's not an explosive agent, in this particular site, we're not going to blast anywhere on the site. We're actually going to perforate the entire perimeter of the site with a 6-inch on center with a drill to basically create a perforation similar to a piece of paper that will help relieve vibration to the adjacent properties. Then we're going to perforate the ledge at a pattern that we are going to use a mechanical method, which I'm sure you guys have driven by Islington Street, which is a hoe ram, which is basically a large jackhammer attached to an excavator. That's how all the bedrock is going to be. We propose to remove all the bedrock from this property for the proposed construction. Use of those agents is effective when you're not necessarily digging a hole in the ground, but when you have a face that you have relief from, so that when you put the agent in the holes, it will pop the face and relieve it. We might be able to incorporate some of that once we get a hole started and get down to grade, so we can continue to flop the face forward in the excavation. So we're going to explore all those non-explosive options to get to grade on the project.
I was just thinking that it would be better for your neighbors if you weren't sitting there chipping away for a month.
Yeah, unfortunately, even though using those agents, to downsize the material to be able to load it and take it away, there's still going to be some element of that. But we're going to use whatever method we can, obviously, to make it go fast and painless as possible. To answer the other question, no, we didn't provide a cross-section of what the ultimate wall will look like, but I can describe it. It would be, if you're familiar with like a gravity retaining wall, it's battered. We'll maintain the existing capstones at the top, and then the wall will batter after it's engineered down to a grade sitting on the footing that is 4 feet below for frost protection. So that batter in the nature of a wall, where all the forces on a wall are on the bottom, which creates the overturning. As the wall batter, it decreases those forces. So this wall will be constructed in the period or the era in the front will look more to the period it was constructed than it does now, because the mortar that's holding it together now will be behind it, and the stone will look as if it's dry stacked and dry laid like it did when it was originally built, which it's kind of lost some of that flair that it used to have in its period. Behind it, there will be reinforcing put in the stones that will not be exposed, reinforcing and concrete to create that batter, so it becomes a engineered design retaining wall that's built out of mortar, rubble, masonry, and concrete. So that's the cross section it would look like. It will not be a vertical wall. Yes, sir.
Wondering, give me a roundabout, how much of the material of the wall is going to be the stone that's there now, and how much of it's going to be modern materials?
The stones that are there now, any stone that, and there was some of them I could point out on the screen that we recognized as being, when they repaired it, if there was a void and some of the stones may have been lost because the wall was deteriorating, they incorporated probably some fractured rock from a manufacturer, from a quarry. Those rocks will actually be pulled out that aren't in this era and used in the back of the wall. All the rocks that were from this era and matched the texture, which was either harvested field stones or rocks that were split with wedges and dowels and hammers, etc. All those will be palletized and reincorporated into the wall, and then we will acquire and purchase. We can purchase rocks that are from field stones or of that same manner, similar as when we put the cobblestone medians that we put in on Islington Street. You can buy those stones that look that era to duplicate it. So we have incorporated pallets of any loss of stones that we can't salvage or won't use because they don't match the period. We'll enhance it with rocks that look like that period, similar to cobblestones that we buy new but look old. So we're going to buy dated, basically weather-dated rocks in a pallet form and incorporate those into the stone. So it won't be sections of old, sections of new, it won't look like a patchwork quilt of old and new.
But the wall that's there now is 4 feet deep at the base. It's all, I would think, period stone, mostly.
Yeah.
And when you're done, that's just going to be a veneer of stone on top of a concrete wall?
That'll be it won't be just a veneer. The wall, will use every ounce of wall, and especially if it was double-sided, and if there's stones in the middle of that wall that we can take apart and clean effectively and use for the face, all that rock will be reused. Any rocks that are undesirable or in the wall that won't give a period or era appearance will be utilized for the reinforcing in the batter in the back of the wall.
So David, are you asking how deep the face will be?
I'm wondering what we're buying. Yeah.
Yeah, the wall will still be a mortar, rubble, masonry wall. It will not be a concrete wall, which you typically see in a building section, where they build a concrete wall with a shelf and they just put veneer on the front. This will be a modernly reinforced, but stone, mortar, rubble, masonry retaining wall.
I'm just trying to, I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what's reinforced mean?
Meaning we're in the core of the wall.
Which isn't the core of the wall all stone? Or you're saying this is two walls a foot thick with rubble stone in between?
Well, what they probably did, if it was a finished face on both sides, yes, the mortar was the glue that held it together from the inside with the less desirable angular stone that you can't get a flat face from in the middle, and then they took the older stones and used that as the veneer, similar to if you had a brick wall in front of block and then brick on the inside. So all that material is going to get reused.
But when they built this brick wall, they didn't have mortar.
So
People didn't have enough cement to plaster their houses, let alone build walls with.
So then it was dry stacked and chinked together, and so that's where she was saying there's not just a front.
We don't really
face.
know, is what you're suggesting.
We don't know how it's built, but when we excavated the front was similar to the back. So
Which is the front and which is the back?
this is the front, we excavated on the back.
You said when we excavated the front, and I'm wondering what that meant.
I apologize.
Okay, all right.
What
Just,
would
again,
have been the old front and the pound?
This
Yes.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, if that's where we were going. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Reagan?
What kind of mortar are you proposing to use in this?
Well, the mortar would be in the middle of the wall, but it would be your standard mortar that you use in masonry, but you're not going to see it.
Right. My concern would be to use a more historically appropriate mortar, a softer mortar. Just because I wouldn't want the stones to be damaged by a very hard mortar, or if for some reason you always want your mortar to be the softer piece that is the sacrificial part of your wall. And so I was just, I mean, I have a background in conservation. I've always been taught when you're working with historic materials, you use a softer mortar.
Okay.
So.
I would leave that to our mason, who was the one who constructed the bridge rehabilitation in Plymouth, where that went through a similar cycle of failure, repair, failure, repair, failure, repair, and finally they took it all apart and say, okay, let's reconstruct this back to the period of when it was built. So they took it all apart and reconstructed it to get rid of the same situation that we have here. So, and all those details can certainly be vetted out, but this gentleman, J.C.B. Colby, who has done a lot of our hardscapes, done a lot of retaining walls in this city, engineering could speak to his qualifications, and he's done it all over the state for various agencies and private developers or private entities. He knows this work. He's the one that's worked on that bridge for 3 years to rebuild it piece by piece. So he would know what to mix, what ratio to mix it with, and what kind of mortar to build this wall so you don't see it and the glue that's holding it behind it is the appropriate mortar.
Yes, Martin.
So, for clarity's sake, when it's done, will you see the mortar in the wall face, in the outside face?
No, you will not.
It'll look like a dry stack,
Yes, it will.
but it'll be secure, it'll be structural so that I couldn't walk up and pull out a stone.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, you couldn't. Yeah.
good.
Anyone? Yes, Margot.
So originally, there was discussion of documenting, numbering, labeling these stones, removing them, storing them, bringing them back, and putting them back the way they were before. That is not what you're describing, correct?
That's correct. That is not what I'm describing. Because of the intermixing of the non-period stone, we would then be putting those back in place. We're still going to photograph it. We're still going to document it. We're still going to clean them, and we're going to palletize them. But to take it to the next level and make sure every one goes exactly back to where it's supposed to, now we've come across a stone, which is that dark gray one in the center lower right. That is a piece of ledge that was incorporated into the wall that's not of the period. We have to now replace that. And because we have, you can see there's a lot of smaller stones than large slabs and smaller stones. And then you can see the more methodical coursing as you get closer to the top, what part of the wall was repaired. So it doesn't have that, can't think of the word, but it doesn't have that randomness on how, even if you look at a stone wall is built or the mortar rubble masonry wall, and again, this is a little different, that we built when we constructed the Route 1 near the church, just before you get to the dinner horn and the Bratskeller. Now, that's a true mortar rubble masonry wall. You see the joints, but part of it is there's a randomness to how the wall looks, so it looks like an era that it was constructed. Some of the randomness is gone from the years of repair. Now, we don't know when it was repaired previous to this past one in 10 years, but you can tell by that there's just some newer era methodical stacking that you wouldn't get from that era.
Okay, sir, you've given your opinion on that, and I think that you have brought up something that we need to discuss amongst ourselves. So we all understand that this wall, as originally proposed, was going to be photographed. I don't know how they would number it, but somehow it's and stored off-site and brought back and replaced exactly. And now we're hearing that this is not going to be, that it will be rebuilt, and a lot of the stones will be replaced with older stones, either that they're going to get from the back of the wall or that they might have to purchase. So how does everybody feel about this? Yes, Reagan.
Well, I have a question about this, and this is, I guess, probably more for Tracy to explain, I guess, the reasoning behind going to this approach rather than embracing the total history of this wall, rather than just a restoration of one period, but actually embracing and understanding and preserving the full history of the wall, which would include modern infill and repairs and things like that to tell the full story.
We'll hit her first.
We hadn't considered putting it back in a non-original state, but I guess that's something we could certainly consider if that's the direction. The thought was to not replicate the modern materials in rebuilding it, but if those more modern materials are deemed historically important, we can certainly consider using all of the material as it is right now.
Okay. Some other opinions, please. Martin?
It looks like you've done your homework and that you brought in experts to do this properly. I can live with the fact that you're choosing to build it to a certain period. And I think that I don't see this wall as sacred. I didn't even know it was there until this project. So, also, I think about other projects in preservation. Recently we had this steeple rebuilt. It doesn't get more sacred than that. And so I think it was all for the better. And so I see this too also as a way of preserving this wall. You do have to disassemble it. And I can live with that. So I will support this effort.
Dan? Well, I'm over here, and then I'll get to you guys. Sorry.
Ideally, it would be nice to leave it be, but it's not like you're building a little shed or a garage behind it. It's major construction. So the chances of it being destroyed by the destruction is very high. So how can we save it? Do we save it as the way it looks today, or do we save it as the way it looked when it was protecting the pigs and the cows and everything? And I think working back that way makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. Yes. David?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've always thought when I looked at this wall that first of all, I'd never known what it was. I'd never even entertained the notion that it was a pound. Thinking about that, I've seen a number of pounds. They're rarely over 3 foot tall, because I think pigs aren't big jumpers, is really what it comes down to. And this, at least on the Court Street side, is quite tall. But to that end, I've looked at this wall for a long time, and there's a habit of people laying stone. These are probably from Durham. They look to me to be a diorite. If you've ever driven on along Route 4 on your way to Durham, you see a whole wall of it on one side. There are a number of outcroppings. They were brought here by Gundalow. This is just up from where they were landed. But you typically run courses with this stuff, and it is fairly regularly coursed. But in the middle, there's a huge, at least in more than one area, there's some huge stone that run across as a course. And it always struck me as odd to be in a situation where I was lifting some of the largest stone I was going to build on a wall or a chimney or the side wall of a house, way up in the air. You typically want to use them at the bottom where it's a lot easier for everybody. And I wonder if combining those two thoughts together makes a little bit of a storyline that says that this wall's actually been rehabbed a couple of times. And at some point in our past, not the dark history of the wall, but in our past, someone decided that as a pound, you could get filled in and become some sort of a lot, but it wasn't really tall enough to fill in some other part of their area, and so they raised the wall up that last little bit, and that's why we see this incorporation of larger stones. That may fit into the story of why there's pieces of shale or schist mixed in with the diorite. I think we lose all sense of that conversation completely when we do pickup sticks with the wall. And I think that this is a poorly thought out plan that doesn't satisfy my interest in preserving a feature in our community. Just a thought.
Interesting story there, David. Now that you look at it, there does seem to be somewhere at the 3 or 4 foot mark, a continuous row of large stones. Maybe that was the top of the old. Everything has a story to tell, that's for sure. Margot? Oh, I'm sorry. Rich, go ahead.
Thank you. So I do think this wall is very important. I've walked by this wall since I could walk. But I think the debate here is whether we are trying to preserve history when this wall was originally built, or are we trying to preserve all the history that's happened since then till now? For me, I include all that history. Like Commissioner Adams just said, this probably was a smaller wall, and that logic to me makes sense, that the largest stones wouldn't be used on top. And it's very evident that you can see a big line where it probably was a smaller wall, and then they decided to change the use of that wall, possibly when they infilled it, possibly before that. But that is part of the history of this wall. All these efforts are to make so we don't destroy the blocks of this wall. All this effort, whether we want to build it the way we did back in 1600, or we want to build it the way it is now and replace it in kind. But I think these efforts, we're placing it more in kind. I think keeping that history is more where I'm leaning. Like numbering the blocks and not going back and trying to recreate history.
That's what you think is the idea of numbering.
I think that preserves everything that's happened to the wall up until today. You know what I mean? We can eliminate some of the history because, you know what I mean? Maybe people didn't like what they did those years, but it is part of the history, good or bad.
Yeah, Margot, I'm sorry, I missed you last.
No, I think my concern was how you even go about reconstructing something that nobody has any pictures of. You're sort of reconstructing the original wall based on a theory and based on research of other walls that can positively be dated at that time. So, the ability to say, yes, we've recreated this wall historically is a little bit tenuous. And so I tend to lead more towards the entire history, and this, I think, is a unique wall. It tells its story. Whether we've interpreted it properly is only the stones know, but it has a unique character to it. Its fabric has a pattern that you don't see in any other wall, because it is itself. It has big rocks, small rocks, long rocks, different rocks, the wrong rocks, whatever you want to call it. So I'm inclined to support having the wall retain the character that it has today. The concern I have is, how do you do that? Because there are a lot of pieces that make up the fabric of this wall. It's not big blocks, it's easy to number and so on. It's a lot of stuff. Maybe it's possible to number the big blocks, photograph as detailed as Tracy has, and you end up with a fabric that is similar in texture. The pattern just isn't exactly the same. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah. Can I just second that? I'm sorry, I missed something. I think there's a gas leak at my house, so I apologize for that interruption. But I agree that by showing the evolution of the wall, then there's a template to work with and a goal to try to achieve versus and I don't doubt your expertise at all, but I think there's an unknown product at the end if we don't address it as an evolution.
Okay, well, Tracy, it seems that we have the majority of the commission would like to see this thing documented and replaced the way that it stands right now, using modern methods behind it and whatever that the mason feels he has to do behind it. It won't look perfect, we know that, and there are some stones that are not granite, and we know that, and there's one brick. What do we feel about that one brick? I see it in there. Unfortunately, it might have been something that was just stuck in 15 years ago.
coming back some night from the press room, you know? It could happen.
Been there, yeah. So that seems to be the feeling of the board. That is the feeling of the board. Yes, would you like to speak again?
Yes, thank you. And I did want to point out that, part of our step number 3 is to document the face of the wall appearance with pictures and elevations.
Yes.
So this, we're going to take the utmost care to put it back as much as we can. The numbering, which was brought up before, what that constrains you into from a structural standpoint is you might be putting a rock back that really shouldn't go where it needs to. So by documenting the pictures, the evolution of the wall that obviously we've heard is the most important is going to go back in.
Okay.
But same as you course the wall and they overlap and the joints overlap, if there's an area where that didn't, well, if number 12 is supposed to go with number 13, but it's not appropriate, it shouldn't, so.
I understand what you're saying, and
Yeah, so that's, we're going to document this thing, pictures, elevations, and videos, and he literally puts it on the wall as he's building it in sections and puts the wall back together with the larger rocks where they were, the smaller ones where they were, and not using inappropriate rocks where they shouldn't.
Okay, thank you. I understand that there could be some little problem in there that you don't want to replicate, and never one to tell a craftsman how he should do his job, and I'm not going to start now. So my opinion is the same as you've heard before. So with that,
May I
yes,
interject?
you can.
Do they put the mortar back the way you see it now?
I don't think that is.
I mean, because
like-
maybe that's what's holding the wall together, since it's not properly being rebuilt. So,
Mr. Burke, I would ask somebody with more knowledge of walls. Mr. Adams, what do you feel about that mortar that's on the bottom 2 feet there?
Those stone at the bottom 2 feet, it's hard for me to believe that they've ever been moved.
Yeah.
And so that mortar is just taking the place of some shims. I don't think that any of those stones ever exhibit any sort of looseness. I mean, I imagine that some of the stones I'm looking at, probably 500-600 pounds. It would take more than a sidewalk plow to even move one. So I don't think the mortar's that important. They were trying, no doubt, to make the wall look better at some point right up against the sidewalk, be my guess. But, Mr. Chairman, is this one of those times when we should bring in someone who actually does know something about it other than a people with opinions? I wonder where we're headed with this, because it just seems like there's a nuance here that's going to be, that I'm fearful could be easily missed.
I know what you're saying, but I do feel that we have had an expert here from his company who has masons that have done this work before, and I'm satisfied with what he is saying about actually documenting, so it would look sort of like a blueprint, each section of the wall, along with photographs. So they know how to reconstruct a wall. I don't think it's necessary at this time.
Mr. Chairman, not to continue this just for the point of argument, but in one of the back pages of this, there's a advertising brochure with some pictures of a stone veneer on a bridge.
I saw that.
And it's this lovely stone that looks like Swenson granite from the mid-state. It's flayed, it's sawn, it has joints, it has all square joints, and was probably, when it was installed with a cement-based mortar originally. And so that they did a wonderful job putting it back means that they are thorough people and can be thorough people and can do technically difficult things, but I don't feel like we've gotten that answer from this contractor. And I appreciate your sensibility of his professional status and his craft history, but I just don't feel it.
Yeah. I would say I agree with you on this wall that you're showing. Unfortunately, this is a different type of wall in this bridge. We're looking at the arch of it apparently here. And obviously it's not appropriate for what we're looking at on our sidewalk in downtown Portsmouth. But there again, these stones are all similar. And the stones that he has to work with, which we're requiring him to work with, are not similar. They're all different in their own little ways, and that's what makes this wall unique. But there again, it's a wall. Any other opinions? So I'm going to open this up to the public. Would anybody in the public? Okay. We do have a member of the public that wanted to have a little slideshow, but go ahead.
Not I.
Not I.
Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. Mr. Adams, sir, God bless you. To the rest of you, I do remember
God hates
that this project was approved subject to the wall remaining, at least at that point that the major project was approved. So now we're at a point where it's what I call smoke and mirrors, and Mr. Adams might know what that means. Looks pretty, but it's not the wall. And I think perhaps what many of us are very, very fearful of is that you have a wall that when you all talked about it being restored at different points in time, everybody thought the wall was important enough to keep it there and to work on it the best they knew how to maintain that history of Portsmouth. And yes, we don't know totally what's behind that wall. We have a certain idea, but there's stuff in the middle of it. But when you start taking apart a puzzle like that, and you don't number every piece, to sit there and suggest to the public that the same wall will appear at the end of the project is lunacy. It's going to be a bit like the commercial that I'm old enough to remember, and many of us are going to end up walking by that wall going, where's the beef? There was that nice big Russian woman who'd walk by, and it was a Wendy's commercial, and she'd open up the hamburger and go, where's the beef?
All right. Thank you, Paige.
So it's like, now, okay. So to give you an idea, to my mind, how important the wall is to so many of us, the new book that we all have, and it's fantastic. But I suggest to you all that where they remembered the eagle on Treadwell, this should be a number 102. That it was just an oversight that the wall didn't make it into the book.
Yeah. Thank you very
So
much.
I ask you all to consider yourselves when you make your decision, how good is anyone at putting back a puzzle? And could not the sewer line or the utilities be brought in through the driveway that goes up and around the wall? And if there's bedrock, and there's too much bedrock, then the issue is the garage underneath the structure. And how deep are they going to have to go through the bedrock? So I'm glad I'm not in your spots tonight, but I beg you to save one bit of Portsmouth's history that can't speak for itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to say, without opening up arguments, is that we do have the ability to put this back as we see it here. Mind you, in any other city, this wall could be removed and there would be a concrete retaining wall. In any other city, they might put brick veneer on it and maybe a concrete cap on the top. We're not asking for that. And I'm sure that this is much more difficult than what other cities might allow. So now we have Ms. Paula Dura to please come up. Would you like to come up, Sue?
I'm the one that brought in some handouts and a couple of slides for a presentation. I don't know if you would give me the indulgence to be able to show it.
He's going to pull this up.
Would you like to have copies as well? Is your choice. Or Nick can give you the file.
I'll take the hard copy.
Is this a good first one? Oh, I'm getting up.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want a hard copy? Yeah. I only have the one. Over here, there's a few hands up. Hope you made enough.
Very good, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Greenleaf, so this is later.
Is this the pointer we're over here? I'm kind of new with this.
If you hold the button down,
The first
the
one?
round button, I think, hold it down.
Yep.
You pointing it?
I'll show you.
I never used that one before. Oh,
Hold it down.
pretty. Thank you. Hi, my name is Sue Polidora, Middle Street, and I'm sort of a historian of different properties, and this is one of the ones that I have focused on just because of the historical value of it. As many of you know, that's where George Washington stayed when he first came. Of course, the dwelling before the fire. Many, I can give you a long list of the people that came and stayed on that property that are very prominent, not only in Portsmouth history, but in national history, like Pierre L'Enfant, designer of Washington, D.C., and also New York City. He came in a ship in 1777, and John Landon was living in that house that was there before, and he loved to host people, and he was one of the people that came and stayed there. So this here is the map, the original map goes back to, was done in 1800, surveying the property before the Greenleaf family sold it to the Treadwell family. All right, so if you look closely in this area right here, you can see an area close to the wall on this side. It says well. So the well was right in back of that house. There was also a retaining outer wall. And yeah, great, it expanded. But I just sort of wanted to give you the idea of where it came from. But the next slide is a slide that took this map and we superimposed the boundaries of the property as it is today using GPS technology.
I'm working on it.
All right. Well, he's working on it. And I just want to clarify, I've heard the term several times used tonight that this was a pound held, where pigs were held. Actually, this was called a place of refuge during the Indian Wars. There is no way that you will have a place of refuge with a 4-foot wall. It was called a castle for a reason. The walls were high enough that you couldn't penetrate them. So the idea that this was somehow a pound for the city doesn't reflect the fact. Like, let me show you right here.
It says garden.
This is the boundaries right now. This is the wall on the red on the bottom, and it turns yellow as it goes up. This line right here is another, it's a boundary between this part of the garden and the stables. So within the property, you had the garden, you had the stables, which mansions of that era had, for carriages, for horses, and a place to grow the food that the inn would consume. This was called the Brewster Gentile Inn. There is no way that they would have allowed pigs to be running around next to a genteel inn any more than we would have pigs running around the Sheraton today. And it's pretty comparable to that. So to say that that was what it was in those days, I kind of doubt it. And I think the map kind of speaks for itself. The fact that there are lots that were available in those areas right there, maybe the town took it over for that purpose, but they were not within the retaining wall. And I grant you the retaining wall in this area right here was not managed right, because when you look at it, it was not preserved. People were careless many years ago, and they did not preserve it right. But this one here is very prominent. Everybody can see it. It's part of the original structure. So I just brought this in because I just wanted to show you there is more to it than we have been told tonight. And I realized that you have to take it down in order to protect it, and when it comes back up, it's not going to be the same. And I'm torn because I know what you're up against. I know that you have to do something. But I'm also on the side of the history. There's so little that is left to preserve. Have you seen that little model that sits right there at the entrance of this hall? Is the old State House, because Portsmouth used to be the capital of New Hampshire in monarchy days. That's the old State House. The portico of that State House was where George Washington came and spoke to the people in 1788 or 89 when he came. That structure was removed because it needed to make room. It was right across the North Church, right in that intersection. It was removed because we needed to make room for the new. It was put aside to wait until we can do it someplace else, put it someplace else so we can preserve the old history. That building was cut up in pieces and stored in a container. The container is in Concord, New Hampshire. I have inquired. There's nothing left other than just rotten wood. Nothing left of that structure. That's where the city council met in those days. That was one of the most important buildings in Portsmouth, next to the church. That's where they usually build them. So what else are we going to do away with? I don't know. But if I can speak about those things, I will, and I just came to give you that information. I don't think this was a pound in any way, shape, or form, and I think the evidence speaks for itself. So,
Thank you.
yes, sir.
Yes, Mr.
This
Ballard.
overlay map that you brought us, is there a date on that map?
1800, you can see it right there.
I looked, I couldn't, but thank
Yeah,
you very much.
It's in there. It's kind of blurry. You need to just kind of blow it up a little bit to see all the details of it. That map was given to me by Terry Packard, which is, he is the 9th great-grandson of Thomas Packard, who lived and built that house and lived in that house. So that map was given to me by him.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay,
And
thank
for all
you.
your research, too,
Thank you so very much for allowing me to do this.
certainly.
Thank you.
Next.
Excuse me. Hi, my name's Richard Nylander, 17 Franklin Street in Portsmouth. I think many of you know that I'm a preservationist, so it won't come as too much of a surprise that I'm speaking against this proposal to temporarily remove and then reconstruct this wall. I think it's been proven pretty well tonight that it could well date to the early 18th century, which makes it among one of the oldest built structures surviving in the city. The applicant has provided a very good summary of the various changes the wall has undergone over the years, and I would submit that it's precisely those changes, those changes over time that should be preserved. They give the wall its current character, a unique and distinctive appearance that a reconstruction can never completely replicate. And while a stated goal of the proposal is to, quote, properly restore the historic wall more closely to its original state, whatever that was, if approved and the plan goes through, the wall will never be an old historic wall again. It will only be a newly laid wall made from old salvaged stones. Portsmouth prides itself on its historic heritage, and I think we need to do all we can to continue to preserve it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nylander.
Thank you.
Yes, next.
Good evening. My name is Beth Margison, and I live at 24 Marcy Street. I am a member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and this application came before us in November of 2021. And in the materials to us, it did say that the stone wall was going to be preserved. Or actually, I think they called it a granite wall. Now, to be fair, when I look back at the certificate of approval that the HDC issued for this, that was not part of it. I do not know how much of that assurance swayed ZBA members. It did for me. I don't know if it did for anybody else. It very simply was just not part of the application in front of us. But I rise to speak against taking down the wall for all the reasons everybody says. Its randomness is its charm. It's not planned. It has layers of Portsmouth history. That wall is an iconic feature of the neighborhood of that corner. And I do not believe that it can be rebuilt in any way that it will be less organic, less authentic. It will be sort of, something sort of faux history. I hope that you can leave this real historic wall in place, protect it during the construction, and preserve it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Susan Denneberg, and I live at 44 Wybird Street. I didn't know much about the history of this wall, but I've always thought it was pretty cool when I walked by it. And I'm really concerned that we should honor, celebrate, and cherish what we have. And the discussion about shall we dismantle this wall and try to recreate it somehow, that doesn't work for me, and I don't think it works for historic Portsmouth. And I know that this board is here to make sure that we do preserve what we have in Portsmouth and it doesn't all disappear on us. I'd like to remind you that there are times when people say they're going to renovate an old building. Let's look at Bow Street. Let's look at the Martingale Wharf. We're going to renovate that, they said, and what happened? It didn't work. It ended up with falling in, building a new building. I don't want to see that happen to this wall. Let's look at the bigger picture of preserving Portsmouth. And let's make sure that we want to preserve the wall. Maybe there shouldn't be anything built behind it. I think we need to look at that really carefully, because if you're going to destroy something because you want to put up something bigger to fill someone's coffers of a developer, then I think we ought to look really carefully at that, and I think that that's what your mission is here. And I would appreciate you considering that we should not tear down this wall, and I would respectfully ask that the developer reconsider what it's doing. If they want to tear down a wall just because they want to build another piece here, I was interested to know that there's all sorts of stone that has to be taken out to do that. Maybe that's why no one's built on it before. Maybe we should preserve that as well. And I appreciate your listening. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Patricia Bagley, 213 Pleasant Street. I was compelled to speak tonight because Commissioner Doring, you wanted to hear from the public. You had said at previous meetings, and I'm glad some people are here tonight to speak. And I am here to speak for the wall and the preservation of the wall. I'm trying to understand how we got here, because it seems it's been rather backwards. A year and a half ago, in June of 2021, there was a discussion here about the wall, and architect Kozak said in response to Commissioner Ryan, emphatically, we are not taking it down. She further stated that while the east side of the wall needed repair, the court side was in good shape. 5 months later, in November of 2021, Commissioner Rudick said that she was thrilled that the wall was staying and relieved for the integrity of the wall. Commissioner Ryan motioned for approval with 7 stipulations, and he further said the project would preserve the integrity of the district, noting that the commission took their position very seriously and that he would not approve the project if he felt that it would destroy the character of the historic district. And here we are. So the application originally was built upon the premise that this historic wall was staying. And now we're trying to save it from being damaged. I have a hard time understanding how a developer of Mr. McNabb's caliber could possibly get to this point and not know, that he did not know in 2021 what was ahead of him. He is a well-established builder. He has built a lot in Portsmouth, and he has done a fine job. So this is just like coming in a backwards approach, and it's really troubling. So now, and by the time we even get to the public hearing tonight, the decision seems to be made already that, okay, we'll take the wall apart, but what's the least damaging way we could do this? Well, maybe we should try to replicate it. Well, yeah. I mean, Commissioner Adams, you spoke to it perfectly. I mean, the wall on Court Street does not need enhancing. It does not need to look like the bridge. That's beautifully done, but that's not what we have here. This wall is a piece of history. It is unique and prominent, and we are the citizens of history in Portsmouth. And so while some of you may not think it's sacred or that it matters, it matters. And because it can't speak, it matters even more that we speak for it. So I feel very strongly about not doing anything to this wall. If you decide, because this is your job, to decide this, it needs to go back together as well as it possibly can, but it will never be itself. It will never be authentic. And the word integrity that this commission uses over and over again, it will lack that because it will never be true to itself. And if you want an expert, and I would agree that it's almost a little late in the game, John Schnitzler, who has done tremendous work at Strawberry Bank, can tell you exactly all about that wall because I have spoken to him. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Duncan McCallum, 536 State Street. I already made my sentiments known about this project at last month's meeting, so you already know how I feel about it in general. I don't know how this project ever got this far, but if all that's left is the wall, that's all I'll speak about. What I have to say is there is only one way that you are going to make this wall faithful to its history, and that's by not letting the developers touch it. Don't even let them touch a stone. You know, when I came down here, even before Ms. Kozak spoke, I, of course, was against this project. And then she said, well, they just discovered they have bedrock that they weren't aware of underneath the site. How could they not be aware of that at this stage of the game? You know, if I weren't so jaded, I would be shocked. But, of course, at this point, hardly anything ever surprises me anywhere. But how could, what kind of investigation did they conduct? How could this project ever have gotten this far without their being aware that there was bedrock, and in order to carry out their plans, they were going to have to disturb the wall? Now, my crystal ball has been in the repair shop for a long, long time, but nonetheless, I will make a prediction. If you approve this project, they're going to be coming back here later, and they're going to be asking for additional concessions. They're going to say, well, you know, we encountered some unforeseen circumstances. There's some unforeseen conditions that we weren't aware of, and they're going to be asking for more concessions. In fact, you've seen it happen tonight. My friend Paige Trace reminded all of us that when this project was approved, part of the terms of the deal was that the wall was to remain undisturbed. And already they're back here asking for changes. They're asking for additional concessions. They're asking to implement a new plan that is not faithful to what the deal originally was. Who is going to make them honor their promises in the future? Who's going to make them keep up their terms of the deal? Now, my friend Commissioner David Adams was insightful enough to raise the suggestion that you bring in an expert. You have the authority to do that. If I had my copy of Peter Laughlin's book on land use law, I would be able to turn to the right page and cite you the specific statute and provision that says that. But take my word for it. This commission has the authority to hire its own expert and get an independent opinion as to what's going to happen here and what's going to be involved if these developers carry out their plan. And of course, you can shift the fees so that the developers have to pay for it. But as we stand here tonight, I say that we are just not in a position, we are not at the stage where we can approve this project, and I hope that we will disapprove it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the HDC. Petra Huda, 280 South Street. So I've sit here tonight listening to how this project has gone through all our boards. And the first time it went through all our boards, the wall was staying. It's unique to Portsmouth. It holds a lot of history. The patches that came through the years are history. They're unique. Removing anything will change history. And as you spoke, Commissioner Wyckoff, and said, if this was in any other city, we'd remove it and it wouldn't matter. This is Portsmouth. Our history is very important to us. That's why this board is here. And just even the concept of taking it down and putting it away and even thinking that you would be authentically creating it again is unfathomable to me. We sit here and we listen to somebody who's very probably well equipped to do this, and we're already inserting different types of materials, putting different foundations in there. This will change what was here. How can you deconstruct history and try to put it back together the same way? I don't think you can do it. As a resident of Portsmouth that appreciates what we have here, and I urge you to keep what we have here. Urge them to protect the wall. Then I'd like to focus on the same point that Ms. Bagley made. How could a developer such as this not know what was under the property when they came? They went through all the processes, and now they're going to come back 6 months later and say, oh, we found this and it's going to be a problem. We have to remove the last historic wall in Portsmouth. I urge you to vote this down. Thank you.
Thank you. Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave. I love the internet. I really do. While you guys are speaking, I can Google. And I really believe in the hearts of everyone in this room, we want to save this wall. We've heard it in past. You guys have said it. We've heard it tonight. And there are ways to do that. Mr. Adams brought up a good point. Bring in an expert. There are ways to put weighted rocks and weighted things around this wall as you're doing something else. And there are other places in the world that do have HGCs. Again, I Googled it. So, you know, and they put down these barricades that kind of engulf this kind of project, and then they work around it, and they protect it. Portsmouth is historical. Everyone knows that. We want to keep our history. I agree, it should be kept the same way, because it tells us a story. It tells us a great story of Portsmouth. So I ask you, unless Nick has the expertise to put out, you have that right, and I know we've done it before when I sat on that committee, to put out ideas on how to do the construction by putting weighted, according to the internet, again, I love the internet, putting weights on both sides to protect what's here so you can do everything you need to do. Because we want to save this wall. And you and I both know that if we take it apart piece by piece, it's not going to go back piece by piece. So maybe you don't make your decision tonight, but you have someone come in, and I think it's a worthy cause to spend a little money to have someone come in and talk about how can we preserve this wall. And maybe the city pitches in and maybe the developer pitches in a little bit. But this is important enough to do that. And this is what we need to do. We saw the maps that Ms. Polidoro brought forward. So I ask you to take the time and do it right. And I think there's a way to do it. According to the internet, there is a way to do this. And, you know, I don't want it to see it go like the Martingale. And it's the same developer in both situations. And I don't want to see that happen again. So let's take a moment, step back, and have Nick and the city come up with some experts that can really give us an idea of how do we protect this wall, keep it the way. It'll save the developer a lot of money, because I can't imagine marking every stone, taking it away, and putting every stone back. I can't imagine how much that's going to cost. And so I would encourage us to do that. And like and I'm sure a bunch of us will also be taking pictures of the wall now and making sure it goes back the way it came. So I would encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. I just would like to just take a brief moment to say I'm new. I don't vote at this point, but I have to ask, why are we here? We're supposed to be the vanguard in this effort. And rather than have the public come to us, the experts, and tell us why this is wrong-headed, to continue the military analogy, because this is a battle, really, to preserve our history, they're encouraging us to come up as the rear guard, but we're supposed to be the vanguard in this historic, unique city with a one-of-a-kind structure. And that's all I need to say right now.
Thank you very much. Next time I would hope that you, I don't know, raise your hand or something, you know.
Well, I don't feel the need to raise my hand.
Okay, yes.
Good evening, Rick Beckstead, 1395 Islington Street. I didn't come down here tonight. I actually came to pay my property taxes and knew that there was a meeting coming, and it's right there. Been in the trades for over 30 years, since I was 13 or 14 years old. Learned how to reglaze windows and paint because my father didn't like to do either. I have been on many projects all over Portsmouth, all over the Seacoast area, restored some very fine homes. This is one that it is taken down and can't be rebuilt the way that it is. It's absolutely, virtually impossible. Almost as possible as I've seen in the past where we've taken down a chimney to try and reuse the brick. You can't reuse the brick. There's cracks and deficiencies that are within what you see below and what you see on top. It'll never be replaced again, and it should not. The developer, the owner of the property, knew the restraints of this project, of the property itself,
right from the very beginning, and it was never brought up to you as far as the wall, because I don't think he would have gotten approvals on that if it also included taking the wall so it was broken up into two. That's something that really kind of is looked down upon by a lot of people. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I know that you'll make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to close this public hearing.
Let me see if anyone's online.
Anybody online?
Yep, someone has their hand up.
Okay.
Barbara Jenny, do you want to speak? Barbara?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I mean, really ditto for everything people just said. I'm thinking of this old New Yorker cartoon. I wish I could find it and share my screen, where there's like a father and a son bent over a tree stump, a huge tree stump, and in the background is this huge, glorious, felled tree. And the father is saying to the son, but look, this is when, right, this war happened and when this storm happened, and isn't that so cool? Right, and the humor is that the irony is that they just fell to this huge tree to see the history. So I too feel cynical that, this is a developer coming back knowing what was in store, and in fact, was part of conversations where it was discussed that parts of the wall had to come down to make it easier to get equipment in. And certainly anything can be done. Anything is possible in terms of preserving that wall. It just costs more money. And so I hope the committee will choose on the side of preserving that wall and putting the developer in the position of having to decide, if they move forward or not, versus the city caving and saying, okay, move the wall to make the development possible. Because that's happened time and again, and I hope we don't fall for that again.
Thanks, Barbara. Oh. Peter Whalen, can you hear me? Peter?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and the Historic District Commission. Just a couple things. My name is Peter Whalen. I live at 100 Gate Street. My house was built in 1740. When I walk uptown, I walk by that wall all the time. And I look at it as you're removing one of the historic structures in Portsmouth. You're allowing this developer to essentially take that wall down, one of the earliest walls in Portsmouth, and try to reconstruct it. What scared me was the contractor, Severino, saying, this will be an engineered, designed wall, which means it's going to be a full wall. That wall should never be taken down. Never. It shouldn't be touched. It should be preserved. This is why we have an Historic District Commission in Portsmouth. This is your job, to preserve the integrity of the district. And I'd urge you not to allow the developer to touch that wall. Let's preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Anyone else?
No one else, sorry.
Okay, so I'm going to close this public hearing. And what's in front of us is the removal of this wall for the construction. I might add that everything that the public said concerning the fact that it was in the past, that they said they were going to preserve the wall, and that we all had mentioned the wall in the past. That is all true, and I would like to ask, before we have our discussions, and I think we need to discuss this, I would like to ask Tracy how did they come, what is the decision to get to this? Because last week it was, you took the wall out, or last month, you took the wall out of our motion, and so here it is. Why?
Yes, so we've been working and struggling and pulling this off and postponing it for several months now because we want to save the wall. And we're trying everything we do to find the best way to do that without damaging the wall and protecting it as best we can. We've looked at this in 10 different ways, and we've looked at keeping it in place during construction. We've looked at numbering it. We've looked at restoring it to the original condition. We are presenting, we've talked tonight about restoring it to its present day condition. We've talked about how it, in its current state, it continues to move, and every few years you have to fix it. So even if you think you're preserving what's here now today, it's going to look different in 20 or 50 years as it continues to fall over, be pushed back, fall over, push back. New stones, it's an evolving, living, changing thing, which might be okay. But our thought was to restore it, not just continue its evolution into the future, but to respect the original history of the wall. We've looked at numbering it, we've looked at bracing it, and it seems that this is the safest way that can ensure that the stones don't get damaged. If you brace it, it will damage some stones. If you leave it in place, there's a chance it could fall, and when it falls, the stones could be damaged. If we can protect the stones against chips, fractures, and cracks, I think that is a more secure way to preserve the materials in the wall. So that's what we're trying to do, is not damage it.
Thank you very much.
May I ask a clarification
So- oh,
issue?
yes,
So,
Tracy.
Tracy, as I understand it, one of the reasons that the wall has pushed out and fallen over and had to be repaired is because there's all that dirt behind it. Now you're excavating so that this is going to be more of a freestanding wall. So would that not mitigate that issue?
It would be backfilled again. The idea is not to create an alleyway back there. The new building is set back yards behind it, but there's a drainage system behind it. There's on-site storm drain basin behind it in one place, which is required by Planning Board and TAC to address stormwater on-site. We can't move it off-site as it goes now. So there's a lot of engineering behind the wall, but mostly by creating, basically, we'd rebuild the wall, but behind the wall that's rebuilt, there would be another wall which is actually concrete and holding back the earth. This wall would no longer have to do what it cannot do today by doing that. If you don't put a reinforced structural wall behind it, it's going to keep tipping over.
But you could do that. A one-sided concrete wall could be poured behind this thing. And also, if you put even crushed stone behind the wall, that would alleviate the fact that right now you've got soil.
And that is in the
against the
detail.
wall, and it's only a foot deep or 2 feet deep, so the frost gets to it, expands, contracts, pushes against the wall, and all that. But if you had something else behind this wall, you could mitigate that problem. We all know that could happen.
I don't think we're building a reinforced concrete poured wall. We're reinforcing the back with a mortar, and then in the detail on the last drawing, there is loose gravel behind that, and that is the batter that Bernie spoke of at that pitched angle. But you're correct, because it's loose gravel behind it, you don't get the water.
Yes.
That sits there.
Righto. Okay, so I guess I'm looking for a motion, at least for discussion purposes. Would somebody want to get the ball rolling of how they feel this should go?
Why don't we discuss before we go to motion?
Okay?
I would just say that everyone wants to keep the wall and preserve the wall. No one wants the wall to go away.
That's fact number one.
But who's being more responsible? Is it responsible to just say, leave it, don't touch it? I don't think it is. I think you're doing more harm by taking the strategy of just leaving it alone, because it's leaning outward. It's going to fall. And to say it, well, just leave it be and let it be the way it is just irresponsible. It's loving this wall to death, and that's wrong. So, I'll let others speak to it. I just think it's being responsible to rebuild it and rebuild it properly. So that's my take.
So, on this side, I think David and Margot apparently are for not touching the wall. Is that?
Can I do story time? I'll try to keep it as brief as possible.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Years ago, back when we had donkeys and stone tools,
I remember.
I just did a project on a house in Cambridge. The house, very, very old, had 3 significant additions built to this house during the time of fireplace heating. Give you some idea. Each time they added on to the house, they had to put a new chimney in the new room, and it kept going. By the time I got there, the chimney made of 3, possibly 4 different kinds of brick with 3, possibly 4 different kinds of mortar, having all been laid up at different times, having the chimneys that were there sagging and leaning and twisting. We took almost 2,000 brick off the top of this chimney, recorded every single one, and cleaned them all and put them all back together with epoxy and reconstructed the thing. It was hard. It was hard. Did it? I mean, me and a bunch of people that were very careful and conscientious and focused like a bastard, and we did it. It was hard. I think we accomplished what was there to be done. I don't think we harmed the integrity of the chimney, builder sequences, and all of those things that we've been brushing on. But it's hard. It's really hard. The nice thing about brick is you don't have to wonder if they were up on end or anything. They were all laid up like a brick. So that part was simple. Doesn't compare to stone. Anyway, this is hard. It's hard to imagine someone can handle this wall and not significantly change it. I'm not saying I'm a hero, but it's just hard to imagine someone tackling this whole wall the way that I tackled 2,000 brick on the top of a chimney. So I'm not really a big fan of it. Yes, I believe it's possible. I think that in itself is a huge burden to put the developer on, but I really believe that the answer to this question lies between the developer and a convincing expert that can design a program that they can live with.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Wyckoff, may I speak? Yeah. The decision wasn't irresponsible when it was made to keep the wall. Now suddenly it's, Martin, you're saying it's irresponsible, and I respectfully disagree. Unforeseen circumstances, perhaps not a thorough enough site evaluation. I don't know why we're here, but it's not irresponsible at this point. I think it's responsible to find a third independent party to speak on behalf of the wall that can't speak for itself.
Okay.
What happens when that expert says you got to rebuild the wall properly?
Well, there are other alternatives.
Okay.
You know, maybe
Okay.
it's time to scale back the building plans.
We're not arguing that. Reagan.
Well, I agree with everything that has been argued. It's difficult. I think we can all see both sides of this, and we're all trying to figure out what is the best path forward. And I agree with Mr. Adams that I think this can be done, and if it is done properly, it's going to be really, really hard. I think that probably it is a good idea to bring in someone else just so that we have that. We've done that before. We've done that with the Times Building to make sure that we're making the right decision by having several experts. I don't know if John Wastrom, who has worked on it before, would be great. John Schnitzler, I don't know who it is, but you know, we have to weigh the integrity of the wall and keeping it so that it preserves its history and it preserves its story and it preserves its look and the patina that it has on it and all of these things, but at the same time making the right decision that is going to leave it there for a long time in the future. And it may be that, you know, part of me is very much leaning towards, can't we just hold it in place really, really well. And I trust that Tracy and her team has really looked into that to try and figure out if that can be done. But at the same time, if that is going to introduce more weakness and more instability and be a riskier option than to strengthening it properly so that it will last another 300 years, let's get all the information we have so that we can make the smart decision. Neither one is going to be perfect. It's just not.
Okay, so it sounds like we have not a majority, almost a majority of commissioners would like to have somebody else's opinion on this wall. And I'm thinking that's what I'm hearing. And so I would say that we should postpone this until the city can hire somebody to come in and give their opinion on what to do with this wall. Myself, I would prefer to see forms set up on the sidewalk. I know you can drill through. I know that when you get to the inside, yes, your drill bit is going to hit a stone and you're going to make a hole in that stone. I don't care about that. I'm not particularly romantic when it comes to every piece of this wall, but I know it can be done, and that this wall can be, after the forms are up surrounding this thing, it can be filled on the inside with sand or something that's going to go in and take up every little groove that's in these stones. And it's got a good chance of making it. And if there is some damage, then it has to be repaired. But having said that, a lot of people want a third opinion. And so I think that that's the way that we should go.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second?
What's that? Oh, Nick. I forgot about him.
Does it make sense to require a qualified third-party reviewer to be retained to review the application material, the scope of work, and assess the wall if the applicant chooses to not reevaluate doing the same, what you're suggesting, which is leave it in place, shore up the wall? Clearly, it's one of the 10 things they've looked at, and not have a third-party reviewer if, in fact, the applicant first has an opportunity to go back and reevaluate not dismantling the wall, but leaving it in place. We'd save ourselves the time, effort, and their money in having a third-party reviewer if the goal of the third-party reviewer is to potentially come up with a solution to leave the wall in place. Give them a chance.
They're sitting right here right now.
Well, yeah. So does that make sense what I'm saying? Whether they answer it here right now or it just seems like it's worth giving them an opportunity to think about it, whether it's now or...
Oh, she's...
May I make an opinion on this? So I think that I'm not an engineer, but it sounds like this is a tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think it would be in the commission's best interest and valuable to the applicant to have somebody else with a different point of view, with a neutral point of view and expertise to make a recommendation that perhaps hasn't been thought about, or to second the recommendation that the applicant's expert is making. Because I think we all agree that the way in which we'd like the wall to look when this is all done. But I think the risk of the whole thing tumbling down and becoming damaged is very high. And I think we should do everything we can to avoid that possibility. And a third person with a different point of view and with particular expertise could be of value both to us and to the applicant.
Okay, so actually, we've had a motion to that.
I'll withdraw my motion if you'll withdraw your second.
Yes, I'll withdraw. I'm sorry.
All right, well, the team has talked with experts for months on this. I know you haven't, and you don't have that benefit, we would, in light of the concerns and objections, we would like to proceed with keeping the wall in place as it is, and we'll brace it on either side as best we can, and proceed with a vote.
That's a decision. That's their decision.
Do we actually need it? So, just a point of order, I'm not sure we need a vote if that was the original approval. And so that's one question that I'm not answering it, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, that's the way it was a year ago.
The second piece to my question is, it may make sense to have that scope of work for the shoring defined, given everything that's happened here, prior to a vote on the so-called shoring plan.
I'm not sure that we're capable. I'm not sure we're capable of looking at a shoring plan and making decisions about it.
Well, you were asked today to make a decision about a dismantling and reconstruction
Exactly.
plan. So
I understand
they have a
that.
right to ask, and you've got to make a decision.
That they would have their engineers were qualified and would give stamped plans for shoring of this wall. And there again, if there was a section that did loosen up or collapse, God forbid, but, they're going to have to repair it. They're going to have to put it back the way it was. That's just the way it is. So I'm thinking that actually Tracy's suggestion is the best. I'm thinking. And I probably shouldn't make that opinion. What do you feel, Ray?
I think this shoring up plan is so crucial. I would like to have somebody else look at it. If that's within our purview.
Okay, we have a building department. All right, let me just explain the way these things go. They have plans, the plans are
John,
stamped.
please don't lecture to me.
No, I'm not,
about-
okay, I'm not, but
Simply stated
you've
my-
made the suggestion, I want to answer it. I'm not lecturing you. The engineer would stamp his plans for shoring up this wall. The building inspector would look at it. He's qualified to look at plans like that. I just don't think that any of us are qualified to look at it. And I'm also thinking that there's a difference between a mason that is qualified in rebuilding this thing and somebody that could put forms around it that would protect it. That's not an usual mason's job. I guess at this point,
I think we're getting into territory we
don't know.
Exactly.
Right.
And what if we took down the half of the wall, the top part of the half of the wall that's very unstable, and restored that, and left the portion that is mortared? Would that satisfy some people here?
Well,
Would that satisfy some people on the board so that we could do the right thing by this wall?
Understand.
If you care about the wall, you want to do the right thing by it, not just leave it alone. It's not a museum piece, so,
Well, there are going to be
museum piece.
There are going to be situations and moments, especially if they're having to go underneath this wall for utilities, where they may have to dismantle parts of it. And I would want them to be able to come back to us to explain that, because I don't want the potential of this wall collapsing where they're digging under it and blasting under it and everything. So I think that, again, this is, it's just not simple and straightforward, but I think that the plan that they have, if we can number the facing stones, if this has to be done in certain parts, I want them to be able to have to come to us rather than risking the entire wall collapsing at some point, if that's the right thing. And I would be happy to have the information that they have come up with from their experts. If you've talked to a bunch of experts, like you said, we haven't had the benefit of seeing any of that information. So if that, could be presented to us at some point in the future, I don't know. I'm worried. I'm worried about either direction we take. There are worries.
Can I say one more thing?
Certainly.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it seems obvious this is a very historically significant historic resource for Portsmouth. And it also seems clear the applicant has made an argument that it cannot reasonably remain in place. That's thus why we have an application to remove it. So, given the turn of events here and the proposal to simply shore it and get a vote and move on, it seems to me, as an opinion of an outsider, you need to see the shoring plan, and then you need to decide whether you need it reviewed. You don't need someone to create the shoring plan, I don't think. Give them a chance to produce it, and then determine whether it's adequate and what the terms and conditions will be if there are failures during construction. That should be ironed out. I mean, the Times building, we're not building inspectors. We're not structural engineers. And this commission didn't allow the Times building to be torn down just because 6 structural engineers that were hired by the applicant produced a 2-page document saying the building should be removed because it's structurally deficient. We hired a third-party person. But I think it's premature to hire a third-party person till you give the applicant an opportunity to submit, as they did here, a detailed dismantling and reconstruction plan. There should be something, given how we got here and where we started a year and a half ago. I don't think it's going to take them a lot of time. And then you can decide as a commission whether you want to have it reviewed. It's just my 2 cents. But
and it's my opinion that what Tracy was just saying is what was approved, to keep the wall. That's what was approved. That was the stipulations in the past.
And that was before you were told the wall has no value as standing because of all these new founded construction problems of utilities. So there's new information that's being discovered by the applicant.
The utility.
That was not presented to us because it was unknown at the time that conversation occurred. So I think given everything that's happened to be cautious and make sure we're doing the right thing, or you're doing the right thing for that wall, there's no harm in asking for the shoring plan and then reviewing it.
Certainly.
And
No, I
it shouldn't
agree.
take long.
I agree.
If I may. I think that would be appropriate, and it's not unlike asking for a mock-up of, or we could even do a mock-up of the shoring, perhaps, as well as the shoring shop drawings and plans. I do want to just make sure and reiterate what we talked about, which is inherent to shoring up the wall, is that there may be stones in the middle of the wall, which you can't see, that get broken. You won't see them, but they're there. And then also, as if it is found when the wall is shored up, if it is found that for some reason there is severe risk of the wall falling down, even though it's been shored up and braced and protected in every way, if it is found that it seems to be exhibiting stress, which could damage the stones, we would like, as a Plan B, after those efforts have been taken, to be able to remove that portion of the wall which is exhibiting risk and take it down carefully and reconstruct it after we've attempted to do the shoring in place, just as a backup if it is needed to protect it.
I think all that needs to be in the shoring plan, so
Yeah.
it's written down what the protocol is should you have a failure and yeah, right?
And there again, I realize that that doing this is dangerous. I realize this fully. You know, a wall like that, even though it's only 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall, a collapse would be unbelievable. So I think that we need a motion then to essentially say what Nick was saying, that we go with the plan of keeping the wall and asking for the shoring plan.
And continue the,
With-
Continue it, yes.
Right.
To a month,
February good? Or
2 months?
What we're requesting is that you vote for us to shore the wall contingent on receiving a shoring plan, similar to getting a mock-up before building a new brick building.
Okay.
Not to postpone.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, does this also include the demolition of the other wall on the property?
Yeah. Now that we're talking about that other wall.
next to the Clipper, right? Is that what you want?
Yes?
That wall is not on this.
The back portion.
1800
Um,
What were you talking about that? You mentioned
Yeah,
it.
so the very back wall next to the Clipper Tavern is
Was suggested to be harvested.
suggested that that would be removed. The new building is being built about 18 inches away from it at that point, and it would just make construction easier. It's a very different situation. It won't be visible at all. It's going to be, the new building has drainage, and it's right up there. We could probably work around it if need be, but you won't be able to see it either way, and it makes construction really difficult, is all. There was a note in there about harvesting some old stones from that wall to replace the modern stones on the front, but we've decided we like the modern stones, so we won't be doing that.
Okay.
Mr. Wyckoff, why was this wall not addressed previously, if I may ask?
I have no idea. I don't know.
It was presented.
And
She
accepted
talked about
as that it would come down?
I don't think that wall came up at all. Could I have a motion, please, and move on?
Yes. I'll move that we accept the new proposal that they keep the wall in place, and we will review a shoring plan that will give a detailed information about how they plan to shore the wall up, and also detailed information about a Plan B if there are any at-risk portions of the wall, or if there is a collapse or loss in any area, how they are going to address that situation.
Are you doing that under at least an administrative approval? How do we review a shoring plan otherwise?
Yeah, I guess so.
I guess it would be an administrative.
That was my question is, are we're not approving work until we approve the shoring plan?
Well, the shoring plan would be like we approve a mock-up, so that would be an administrative approval.
By you.
By us, because otherwise it's not a public hearing of any sort. But that's generally what we would do.
Okay, so
For a
if we see the mock-up of the shoring plan and we are not having an expert help us with this, and we don't like it for some reason, then we say no, then what
We could vote
does that
against
mean?
the approval of it.
Then
Well, we
it
could-
wouldn't be able, this approval tonight would not be able to be executed.
Right.
Would it be possible to have someone look at this shoring plan first before before we approve or disapprove as an administrative approval?
Not without a vote tonight, that's for sure. You got to authorize the third-party review before you do it, and I'd have to find somebody, and probably it would be better if you approved the person we find, because there may be more than one.
I don't necessarily see the need to have a third-party expert for a shoring plan, because we have established that Severino is a expertized
Yeah, I'm sure they
masonry
have
service. I think
lots
this is
of
probably what
engineers.
they've done.
But to
in this
Margot's
case.
point, which was kind of what I was suggesting, I know it's nice to get what it appears outwardly to be a definitive decision, but if there's a hanging chad that needs an administrative approval in order to make that eligible for a building permit, I'm not sure it's the right way to do it versus just get the shoring plan and vote on the application before you, then have a two-step process where the second step could still invalidate the first one if you weren't comfortable with the admin approval. So I'm not sure it's any better for the applicant.
We've dug ourselves a hole.
I mean,
6 of one, half dozen the other.
Right.
The difference is the admin approval gives the applicant the understanding they're maybe on third base, and it gives the public the position where they're no longer in the game, because there's no public comment for those, where at least if it's continued, everybody has a chance to say something and make one decision. And you have a shoring plan in front of you. And you decide then if you want someone else to look at it or not, but I wouldn't do that before you see the plan. And feel how you feel about the applicant's proposal. But, again, 2 cents from me.
Yeah, we still.
4 cents.
Yeah, 4 cents.
So I'll make a motion that we postpone.
well, I
There's
had
a motion.
I had a motion.
Okay, sorry.
Floor.
So, I don't know if anybody wants to second
Could
the
you
motion.
repeat the motion?
Yeah, just repeat it.
That we approve the updated proposal to shore up the wall, keep it in place, contingent on an approval, an administrative approval for the shoring plan and the backup plan for what to do in case of disaster.
I'll second that.
That's very good. How did you do that?
And if people vote that motion down, we can go for a different motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and we have a lot of different opinions, but we're going to vote on this motion. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Against, say nay.
I'm saying against because I don't think an administrative approval is the right way to follow up on this.
One against. So, did you hear that? Okay. Be careful.
Yes,
Thank you.
please be careful with it.
Okay. Oops. Full collapse of an iPad here.
Got a cramp, that was a tough one. Always keeps locking up.
Yeah. Oh, she wants her little thumb drive.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Only a couple dollars.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you very much for your work, too. You're welcome.
Chair, I could use a short break if I don't know if anyone else.
Okay, so we've had, we want to take a break. We'll be back in 5
Intense
to
2
10.
hours there.
Yeah. I got to take some pills.
She gave everyone that like genuine reaction when she opened up her presents.
Yep.
So like she smart.
Good.
My goodness.
All righty, we're back. So we are now,
What we raise that?
where is Rains Ave anyway?
Yep.
Okay, this is
rolling
a work session public hearing. We don't have a table set up, so requested by 1 Rains Ave LLC, 31 Rains LLC, and 203 Maplewood Avenue LLC owners for property located at 1 Rains Ave, 31 Rains Ave, and 203 Maplewood Avenue, wherein permission is requested to allow the construction of a 5-story mixed-use building and a 5-story hotel as per plans on file in the Planning Department. Said properties are shown on Assessor Map 123, Lot 14, Map 123, Lot 13, and Map 123, Lot 12, lie within the Character District 4 and Historic District. Who is here to
Good evening, Carla Goodnight from CJ Architects. I'm here with Evan Tormey from XSS.
Thank you.
We are on the agenda as a work session public hearing, so would we like to have some discussion in the work session first and then move on to the approval formally, or how would you like to proceed?
I think that would make sense. That,
Okay.
work session, apparently you've given us a couple choices.
Correct.
So where do you want to start?
Okay. When we last met, we had some very in-depth discussion regarding the liner building on Maplewood Avenue, the 3-story piece, and there seemed to be consensus among everyone that making it look like a somewhat different building, and essentially, I think as you can see from the renderings, we've really taken it to another level of development, developing the details, developing some of the expressions of window patterns and so forth, kind of making everything more cohesive. So what we were stuck on was whether or not it should kind of have a much more kind of a cleaner, more modern look and have a projecting balcony on the corner, or whether or not it should be more of a flush representation as you see on 1.0A. So starting with 1.0A, we're looking at the flush execution of the balcony here. What am I doing, Nick? It's not lighting up. There we go. This flush balcony. And then looking at 1.0B, we have a more prominent, darker color, and we've projected the balcony and wrapped it more entirely around here. When you look at 1.1A, that again is the reset or the more flush balcony look. And when you look at 1.1B, we have the projected balcony cornice with the more black finish. We've also represented 1.2 showing the darker cornice and the gray cornice on 1.2B, so there's not a whole lot of difference there.
Wait.
And on 1.3, again, just showing the balcony projection all the way to the right to give you an idea of what it would look like from that perspective.
You're just sliding right through this.
Huh? Well, I'm going right through.
I have a couple questions, so I understand.
That is the end of my choice presentation.
That's it?
Yes.
Does anybody have any questions concerning the initial 1.A or 1.B? Do we all see the differences? Does anybody have
I
any
think it's
opinion?
most prominently represented in the first two images, 1.0s, the O series, instead of what we have up.
Any opinions?
This thing.
Does anyone have an opinion? Rich, you've been oddly quiet.
Yeah.
The cornice and the balcony. I think I'm preferring the more flush balcony. I think it just is a softer feel, but I'm not against the other projected balcony either. I kind of like that cornice. You know, either way, I think you've done a good job of stepping down, so it steps down in the neighborhood nicely. I'm happy with that, especially the rounded edges and making it look, like you said, a different building that's just connected. But those are my 2 cents.
Any other sense? Reagan?
Well, I agree. I think partially because I feel like you've just done a more thorough job of articulating A than B in your renderings. I don't know how you're going to get that smooth, looks like a metal finish.
A
of
Luca
the-
Bond finish.
Okay. It doesn't seem to, that design and detail doesn't really seem to mesh with the building in general. So I think the simplified and more flush A version is more attractive.
Okay.
I would just simply say that either one of these are acceptable in terms of what we should be looking at, so, either one.
No. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with Mr. Ryan. They both have, they're two different sides of the same coin. I think the pieces and parts are very much, one gives you more of a horizontal feel to it, the other reinforces the vertical nature by breaking that balcony up with the flush model. And I think, as almost always, Martin is correct.
God bless you, Mr.
Can I just say, I wonder if it's probably way past time to have this, but over the Christmas break, I've been thinking about this building and where this is headed and how poorly equipped I am to even make any assessment about it. But I keep wondering, over the course of the Christmas break, why this building doesn't have a side that faces the water. If I were building something with this much coin and this depth of plan, why it doesn't look at the water at all. And I'm reminded of the first building I think that you showed us back, 20 years ago, was something somewhere in Baltimore or something, some piece that you'd picked up, a little bit of eye candy that you'd picked up. It was a striking building, but what was interesting about it, it was that we really weren't looking at one end of it from a side street, that it was a view that the building had. And this building has a street presence, which is Maplewood, 40 miles an hour, and a street presence, which is Vaughan, which I don't think anyone in town even knows where it is.
Rains and Vaughan.
And then it's got the water. And this doesn't even look at the water. My thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. Before we go on, Dan, would you like to make any comments or no?
I would go more with the flush balconies, but I think it'd go either way.
Okay. Joanna, do you have any opinions?
I do. I think it was D, and that's not a choice. So the other two, as David said, are sort of like two sides of the same coin. The one I really liked is no longer an option.
Okay, yeah, we want to keep going and we'll see what else we can find.
I guess I would say that, the focus of our design developments were primarily focused on bringing that, liner building into, a more completed, more cohesive piece that, because I think last time we offered multiple choices there, so.
So there's no other changes? 'Cause
Not really,
I
no.
kept looking around the building trying to figure out what else is different and I couldn't find.
Well, in the last session, we implemented quite a few changes on the mixed-use building with projecting balconies and adding some different entry elements and canopies and so forth. So we made the siding darker and changed the a little bit of the window pattern. So there were quite a few updates from the last round to the other building. Did some work on the cornice, and I think everybody seemed relatively satisfied with the change, with the significant amount of changes from our last work session on the body of the building, on the 4-story and 3-story pieces of the building.
The hotel,
The hotel is as it was prior as well. We've been concentrating, again, at the last work session, concentrating primarily on the mixed use and residential piece. Prior to that, we did quite a bit of work on the hotel in like 3 or 4 concurrent work sessions where we arrived at this final canopy, the metal on the outside corner, in addition, a lot of the brick texturing. There were quite a few updates to that a couple of work sessions ago where we found it most beneficial to address, one building because they are, fairly significant architectural creations to, work on one building and then now work on this building. But they are part of the same application.
anybody else want to have anything to say?
Nick, is it possible for us to look at
The model?
model?
Give me a minute.
I will do the whole presentation when we
Let her do that.
go to presentation. I mean, we're in work session now, but when we go to public hearing, I'll review the package.
Okay.
So just to confirm, there were no other changes on the B or C or D, right? Just the cornice and that balcony shown in A?
Yes, the cornice color, there were some color
Yep.
changes. The cornice changed, the color changed, the projecting balcony, and I believe we had consolidated all the window patterns because the smaller squares were not well received, so we went in, we adopted all the same window pattern.
I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Well, you did drop a door in the rounded section on,
Yes,
yes. And did you add a door? Is there a door on B on,
there is not because that it's accessible around from the
Yes.
projection, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's where they'll store their furniture or something.
I hope not.
Oh, no.
I hope not.
Yes, you do. All right. We're waiting for our 3D.
No, we're not. She's going to do her presentation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, she is. I'm sorry. So this is still work session, so anybody can just pipe up if they've got a question or anything at all.
I guess my only question is on 2.3, you're looking out from Market Street, basically across the water to it, and it looks like on the top floor, there are big openings in the windows, or is it just a weird rendering thing?
That is just a reflection of the glass.
Okay.
That is somehow not reflecting, but they are,
Okay.
yes,
So it's not just.
not opening,
Okay.
no.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if anybody in the public would like to speak at this work session.
Thank you. My name is Liza Hewitt. I live at 726 Middle Road. You do not need to approve this project if it is not completely right for Portsmouth. Over the last few months, I've heard members of this committee say, I don't like it, but I guess I'll vote for it. Really? You can say no. The developers are counting on wearing you down. Please don't let that happen by voting for a project that isn't right for Portsmouth. This mixed-use building and hotel may be just great architecturally, but that doesn't mean that it's right for this location. There is a new building in the downtown that many, many people find offensive. You, this committee, voted to approve it. That building is the prime example of a project that may be an architectural gem to some, but may not have been built in the right location. Most of you on this committee have at some point commented that the buildings are too big and the massing is too much. In response to these comments, the developer has spent months rounding the corners of the buildings, and at this rate, it looks like it's going to end up being a rotunda. This may be the right project, but not in this location. You have the ability to prevent yet another monster building from being built in the wrong location. You have the ability to say no to this project if it isn't right for Portsmouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening once again, Duncan McCallum. I live at 536 State Street, and I am opposed to this project. I was here 2 months ago, and I think I made my sentiments pretty clear at that time. I think the project is too big, it is too massive, it is too obtrusive, it sticks out like a sore thumb, and it is inconsistent with the character of its setting. Tonight, however, I will add another couple of specifics with some hard data, which is it is inconsistent with the master plan. You should log on to the city's website, download a copy of the master plan. Those of you who have laptops here, you could do it right now if you wanted to. In the most recent master plan, which was approved on February 16th, 2017, the master plan made clear that this is not the kind of a 5-story building or a 4-story building is not what is called for in this setting. If you will download that, the master plan, and turn your attention to pages 110 and 111, it is black and white. There is a diagram which shows that the buildings envisioned to be located on the water are to be 2.5-story buildings, not 5- and 6-story behemoths. The master plan says, and quoting from page 110, although it is expected that this area, namely the north end, although it is expected that this area will look and feel different from the historic downtown, it is important to ensure that this area is built at a human scale and provides a rich urban experience for everyone. This can be accomplished with strong, I'm reading it literally, it's grammatically correct, but what it says, this can be accomplished with strong pedestrian connections, seating areas, and other amenities. Requiring complete streets and bicycle facilities will also enhance the surroundings. This project that they are proposing is completely inconsistent with that vision. If you look on page 111 of the master plan, you can see just what the drafters of the plan envisioned. And of course, I don't think I need to remind you that the master plan that was approved in 2017 and is the current master plan was done with considerable public input. We had workshops, we had I forget the term that was used, but basically charrettes, thank you. We had charrettes. Considerable thought and considerable public input was put into this, and the result was a product which is inconsistent with the project which is being proposed tonight. So I add that to the comments that I made 2 months ago. These buildings do not belong here, and I urge you to disapprove the project, both for the reasons that I've mentioned tonight and the reasons that I mentioned 2 months ago. And of course, I probably don't have to tell you that I agree 100% with the comments that Ms. Liza Hewitt just made a moment or two ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is Jim Lee, 520 Sagamore Avenue. I'd like to speak against this project. I find it pretty ironic, we spent the last 2 hours talking about a stone wall and saving it, and all of a sudden we're ready to tear down some buildings and put up a bunch of new, huge buildings where they shouldn't be. I'm looking at some of the drawings of this, and if you're driving down the streets where those buildings are proposed to be, the only place you can see the sky is if you look straight up. It's further ironic in a city that's fixing to celebrate its 400 years of existence and is consistently rated one of the top 10 historical cities to visit in the United States. They were talking about building such modern, huge buildings to take up space where that shouldn't be. So I hope you would consider those words when you make your decision about this project. Thank you.
Good evening again. Petra Huda, 280 South Street. I have attended the last couple of meetings on this project, and even though Ms. Rudig was not here for the last one, I recall the objections of the massing and the request to pull it back from the water. What we've seen tonight looks like to me that we're switching the view and we're leaving exactly what we had before and rounding the corners and putting some different materials on that. And I'm speaking of the one on Maplewood. Is this really historic? Is this according to our master plan? I think this commission should ask themselves that first of all. And the next thing would be the hotel. We've seen that before. To the untrained eye, maybe, it looks like a big block, like every other block that is over there that is a hotel. And the fact that nothing was even tweaked on this presentation tonight is very discerning to some residents, as myself. So I would ask you to consider not approving this for the reasons that everybody else gave, and the consistent massing that is going to be on our North Mill Pond and at the gateway, the North Gateway to Portsmouth. So this is what people are going to see. And as a person who used to live over there and enjoy turning that corner off Dennett and looking at the steeple and enjoying the historic view from that side, I have expressed my feelings before of how disappointing this is. But I think we've come to this point now where we just keep coming back and presenting the same thing and tweaking a couple little features on there. The fact remains, the massing is still there. I urge you to vote this down. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no one else, I'm going to close this.
Make sure. Nobody else at this time.
So I'm closing the work session, and we're going to move into public hearing.
I'm going to speak to this when we're done.
Yes. Well, I guess.
Good evening. We're in public hearing
Yes,
now?
this is public hearing, so I guess your presentation doesn't need to be as long as it might be, but you do need to go over all the significant points.
Correct. I'll be
as if we
mindful
hadn't
of
heard
that.
it before.
I'm going to introduce Evan Tormey to open up here with a quick summary, and then I'll launch into the package. Can you go back to 0.1?
You mean 1.0?
Right here.
0.1. Good evening.
Oh, okay.
Eben Tormey, XSS Hotels, representing the applicant. I'll be brief. It's late. I see some yawning. I know there's been a lot of discussion about rock walls tonight. But I did just want to sort of reset here. This project that we have before us tonight originally was 2 5-story buildings. It's since been reduced to, we have a 4-story building with a penthouse. We've been through a lot of great dialogue with you through the course of a number of work sessions. I think we made a lot of progress on these buildings. Again, these are allowed by right. There's no zoning relief required here. This project involves a half-acre park that will be community space along the waterfront for the public to enjoy. There will be waterfront access where there is none currently today. And I think Attorney McCallum mentioned earlier, master plan, complete streets, bicycle facilities, those are included in this project. I know that's not your purview, but just to reiterate, these buildings, we could have built a much larger building here by right. 30,000 square feet, I think, is the allowed footprint. These are both around 15,000 square feet. So we did take that in mind when designing this project, splitting up the buildings. I think Commissioner Ryan mentioned last time, the view from across the waterfront now, when you look at this project, it looks like 5 buildings from across the waterfront at the Marsh Lane Park because of the work that's gone on over the course of the last months with this commission. So I just want to reiterate, this is by right. This is 4 stories, not 5, even though the public notice still includes the original application height of 5 stories for the mixed-use building. And we have spent a considerable amount of time with you folks working on these designs. And I think we feel as a development team, this has really come a long way and that this can be a great project for the city. So I'll turn it back over to Carla. Thank you.
I have some questions on the site plan. As one who has walked along that shoreline, I used to pick bottles out of there because at one time it was a shipyard and it's pretty ripe there. So you have, on the shoreline, you don't have any indications of rock walls or anything or riprap. What do you feel you're going to have that's going to go down to the high tide mark? Because I don't think the grass is going to, or is the grass going to just go down?
So there's no work in that shoreline area anticipated, or in that 25-foot buffer. There is some reclamation of the pier that we're working on permitting,
Yes.
But we wouldn't be. There is some riprap. I think most of that is more on the city-owned land as you get closer to the bridge. But no, it just sort of it's
There's a
existing
lot of
condition.
invasive trees and things like that you're going to bump into.
And and we do, the approvals contemplate removing those invasives. And there is a comprehensive landscape plan that was approved that includes a lot of native species and you can see this landscape buffer not only between the path and the hotel and the berm and the mixed-use building, but also the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board had us put in pretty extensive landscape buffer between the path and the water to keep people and dogs from getting down to the waterfront.
On the right-hand side of the reconstructed timber pier,
Yep.
there's kind of an inlet there, and then it curves around and goes back out onto obviously, that's the city-owned property. But right at that location, the soil can be green. It's green there. I've seen it.
Green
So
like
I know
algae?
that there was dump, and this is just the site plan, and I'm sorry, I should have probably brought this up at the work session, but are you aware of that?
I'm aware that there's an outfall for the city storm drain right there. There's a head wall in that inlet area. And we are proposing, part of the site plan approval was providing an easement to the city in order to replace that. And we'd also be replacing a lot of stormwater facilities and treating stormwater leaving the city streets as well as the site before it goes out
So
that
I'm
head
happy
wall.
that I've gotten that particular bit of information into the public, because it's more than an outfall. There's some kind of dumping had gone on there probably 100 years ago, and I suspect it's copper, but I'm not sure. That's the only questions I have on your site plan. Thank you. Oh, is anybody else?
Can I?
Yes.
Can I just say something about the site plan
Sure.
before we go into the details? Because, I think for me, in fairness to the many speakers we've had over the many meetings we've had that reference the 2015 vision plan,
Yeah.
which was a charrette, a design charrette with hundreds of people participating. And there was wide public agreement on the vision for properties like this in the North End on Rains Ave, Green Street, everything we've been looking at in the last couple of years. And I think everybody falls into this at a different level of either support or disappointment with perhaps the massing scale and rhythm of what's come to you on this site. And there's been a lot of references to this page 110 and 11, which I happen to have in front of me, and you've all seen it, and it's been referred to. It is the vision plan. It's just an illustrative concept for, in this case, the Rains Ave property. And it's very different than what we're looking at. We all know that. We also know that the zoning allows a multitude of outcomes to occur on a property like this. And this may have been the target. But I think it's important for everybody to recognize there are 10 buildings on this site. 1 Rains Ave, these 3 properties that are there today have 10 buildings in the vision plan. And again, it's just an illustration, but it's tangible and you can look at it. And it's been waved about a lot. There are 10 buildings, 6 or 7 of them are within the 100-foot buffer, which has become a big point of contention in the community as to whether the way that wetlands ordinance has been administered for dozens of years is appropriate moving forward. And as everybody here knows, there's been appeals lodged on this project and 53 Green Street and 100 and 105 Bartlett, all of which are in the buffer zone, with heavy criticism towards the conditional use permit issued by the planning board because of the activities in that buffer zone, which is 100 feet. So the applicants made very clear at the beginning of this process, to my recollection, more than a year ago, they chose to pull themselves out of the 100-foot buffer because of that current concern. Well, if you take something with almost the same volume, a bigger footprint is here, much bigger footprint is in the vision plan than what's proposed. The volume is probably similar, 10 buildings versus 2. The hotel portion of the site is smaller than what was envisioned in this illustration, and the mixed-use side is probably bigger, just round numbers. I would say the biggest surprise we didn't anticipate when we did the translation of the vision into the code is these properties were not in common ownership at the time. I think the Cindy Ann Cleaners and the white building in the middle were owned by one entity, but the Vanguard Gym was somebody else. And by pooling the 3 properties, it allowed the height of the taller portion of the site, which is the Vanguard Gym building, which is allowed at 5 stories with the incentive for the green space. That bled over by design in the code, but we didn't anticipate that when we wrote the code. That bled over to a degree into the whatever the white building's called, the office building, and the Cindy Ann Cleaner site. So again, the code allows it. I'm just stating what maybe many of you already know, but I do think it's really important for the community when they refer to this to realize, yeah, this looks really different, and there's an argument to be made that it's more like what we have in the North End than maybe what we wanted. But to get what we wanted required a whole lot of work in the buffer zone. There's a building on the shoreline in here, actually projecting over the water, where a building used to be on Maplewood Ave to the left of Cindy Ann Cleaners. Probably been gone for 50 to 100 years, don't know.
It was a mill.
Yeah. So, again, illustration, but you can't have it both ways. It has to be either spread out with a clear stepping as we wanted, but then you've got to let them work in the buffer zone, and they chose not to do that because of the recent concerns that weren't anticipated when the vision plan was done. There wasn't the concern that there is today. So they've chosen to pull back, go taller where they're allowed to do it, and they're struggling to preserve the step down within the building mass of 2 buildings. So I just wanted to say that because I think there's some really good points being raised, but it's also important to recognize there's some significant constraints you're working around that's pushing you closer to the street edge and then pushing you up. Sorry.
Yeah, Nick, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to bring that up too. It just seems like I would have loved to have seen something closer to the vision plan, but the same people who pushed for the vision plan probably would have filed a lawsuit for building in the buffer, wouldn't they?
I don't know that, but.
No, we don't know that.
Yeah, I'm just wanting to point out what's where and.
Yeah, and I didn't want to beat that horse again, because we did talk about it last time, that we had made significant investment to keep the buildings out of the 100-foot buffer along the North Mill Pond, and that is what really drove the location and size of them.
And I would like to say I was at that particular charrette and went on a few days, and the whole plan that was drawn overnight, pretty much, by some friend.
It's a concept.
Yeah, I know, but it was drawn just like that. We were at the charrette, everybody was putting red dots and yellow dots on what they liked and what kind of buildings they didn't like and all this sort of stuff. And then the next time we came, there were these drawings. So it was haphazardly done. It was done quickly.
It wasn't, but I think that the main point isn't
It was
how
done
quickly it was done. It's
quickly.
that it is a concept, but it envisioned an extensive amount of work in the buffer zone.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't appear to be something many people in the community continue to support. So
Yeah.
then it's got to result in a change in what's left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to continue with your proposal here?
Well, now I have to comment on the site plan. I just want to say that I too was there watching the dots be stuck on the wall and so forth. And, you know, one of the most beneficial and beautiful things that has come out of that that exercise is that the waterfront is returned to the public along many private properties along the North Mill Pond, because I've worked on several of them across the way. And, you know, from the 1 acre park to this, to the continuation of 53 Green Street, I mean, that really is the gift of the master planning piece. And, you know, Nick is correct in the environmentally responsible way to build these buildings is to pull them away from the water and preserve that land. And not only is it pulled away and preserved, it's returned to the public. So I wasn't planning on saying
I didn't
that.
quite say that, but
What?
I like this. Yeah.
Well.
But it is what it is.
All right. So I think that beginning the presentation on 1.0A, we've looked at the choices available for the building along Maplewood. And I believe, just to reinforce for people who are just joining us, you know, this is the culmination of many, many work sessions on both buildings, both separately and combined. And I would say that we would stipulate that the flush balconies be a stipulation as the choice for the approval, based on what I've heard. So looking at 1.1A, you can also see that the changes that were implemented during our last several work sessions on this mixed-use building, the final changes are projecting the balconies, redesigning the entrance. Yep. Redesigning this main entrance of the residential, projecting these balconies, darkening the siding on the upper floors, and of course providing a whole new identity for the building along Maplewood. We also created a much more organized facade and you know, eroded the top of the cornice here at all the balcony locations. Skipping B. Again, 1.2A is just another perspective of the changes I just described. 1.3A carries this theme around to, 1.3A carries the theme of projecting balconies around to the water side, again with a well-defined entry piece, and then the cornice drops down to a 3-story brick structure, an additional setback here, and then the penthouse level, which again, the 4 stories and a penthouse, dropping down to 3 and then dropping down to 3 without any structures above, sort of as cascading down toward Maplewood. And, you know, that is this abandoning the 5-story building in this location. Skipping B, moving on to 2.0, rendering, night rendering of the hotel. Again, illustrating the corner element that was brought into the design during work session, the more dramatic canopy with a little bit of a different look, more vertical dramatic glass elements here, and the brick banding is not as visible in the rendering, but we will see that in the following page on 2.1, where the textures are a little bit more prominent. Banding along here. A different metal element at the top, on the top floor, and then we also have a textured brick base along the entire first floor, and we added in work session a gray base color, again wrapping and supporting the base of the hotel. 2.2 highlights the dramatic corner overlooking 3S. And then another entrance here as you round the corner to the water side. And then when you get to 2.3, you can see that as we again approach the water, the hotel actually steps down to 4 stories for a bay of significant mass here on that corner. 2.4, close-up of that same view. Again, showing the brick texturing band and the band in the base elements. And then also the cornice carries around. We talked quite a bit about the working on the cornice during work session to give it a little more weight and volume. 2.5 illustrates the view from across the pond, through the park, and the restoration of the docking area or the pier, and then of course the 5 different style elements across the water side. And then as I get to 3.0, in the interest of time, these are the construction documents required for submission to the board, to more detail, to represent all of the details of the building as well as the size and dimensional requirements. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on these, and at the end, and then possibly just move to section 5, because there is a significant amount there, but we could move to section 5 and look at materials if you like.
Look at the 3D.
We can do that, too.
Does anybody have any questions at this point? What has already been covered? No?
You can see there's many, many details.
Yes.
There we go. So here in section 5, we're just illustrating the materials proposed for the project, which consist of multiple actual brick veneer colors, as well as the metal panels from Vitribond, which is like a sandwich panel of metal for some of the siding elements, and all of these areas are called out on the elevations and indicated. When you get to 5.2, we're using Marvin Essential, so we are, not using any sort of vinyl products of any kind. Quality of materials has been a long standing mantra of the Historic District, so I just want to reinforce that we are using the higher-end windows, actual masonry and metals, and not plastics and so forth. So the upper levels does go to a lighter material, where we are using siding in a pre-finished color. And then the balcony railings are also metal. Continuing on to 5.5, the proposed light fixtures. And I think that concludes my presentation, unless you have any other questions that you'd like me to answer or any details you'd like us to go over.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a material question.
Sure.
On the site plan, way at the beginning, there's added screens called out as part of the berm structure.
Yes.
Are the materials or style of those screens indicated anywhere?
That is a good call. Luckily, we have an example standing just down the block
Yeah,
that we
I
can
don't,
stipulate.
I don't think they are, but I think the intent and what we had shown in the renderings was similar to what was approved and installed at 145 Maplewood, and also at the entrance to the future park between the AC and 3S. It's an EPA fence system. We could certainly stipulate that if the board or the commission likes, we could stipulate that be the material. But it's a like 6 foot, 6 foot tall fence. It's like 1 by 6 or 5/4 by 6 at the base spaced, and then it's slightly smaller and varying widths as you get closer to the top, capped on top and sides as well. I think it does show up in the rendering on.
Oh, we'll just do it in a minute.
2.5.
Mm-hmm. Yes. 2.5.
Okay, I see it.
So that's something that we could, if we needed the details, we could approve administrative approval. I'm sure you'll
Correct.
have
We
other
could
changes.
submit that
Is there a
for
roof
record.
plan that shows, your heats and your ventilation and all the HVAC stuff?
They are on the models, and they just aren't visible in many of these views because they're set way back on the roof. If you look on 3.6 has the roof plan. Yes, that's true. 3.6
right here.
on the roof plan, and it was 4.6, 4.5 is the plan. And if you look at the renderings, you can see them, 4.5 shows them as well. And if you look at the renderings, they have been modeled, and you can see, let's take a look at, let's see, if you look most at 2.5, you can start to see them popping up in the model, because that's the farthest back view that we have.
There's only one elevator in that building?
2.5, yeah.
The mixed use?
Two cabs.
Yes. One shaft, 2 cabs.
One overrun then.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the color you're going to screen it or paint it? And is that metal? What is
Those are just the masses of we haven't modeled each individual piece of equipment, but those are the massing.
You'd come back for administrative approval on all the mechanical
Mechanicals,
screens?
sure.
And unless they're in here? There's no screens in here?
No screens.
Okay.
No. I don't recommend screens because I think they just create more mass
It
around
could be
mechanicals.
paint screen, whatever it is.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Dark. There's no restaurants proposed at this time in there, so.
Probably will be, right? Yeah.
We certainly aren't precluding there from being restaurants in the space, so there could be fans coming up to the roof level. We have accommodated with some shaft space within the building. So the tenant space is on Maplewood Avenue on the first floor and also along Rains Avenue. Could or could not be a restaurant. That's, it's an allowed use. Any equipment, the only equipment would be a makeup air
You'd have to
unit
come
and
back,
exhaust
though,
fan.
anyway.
If
Yeah,
any equipment.
any equipment to be added, yep. I think we did show
on the roof plan?
No, we just have the RTUs and the condensers, so I guess there's not a roof fan shown there. So anything that would be added, nothing would be installed at this point, would be added later by a
When the
tenant
full
fit up.
mechanicals are complete.
Yes, David?
And this is more than likely way out of our purview, but has there ever been any conversation about a photovoltaic on the roof? Is that something that you think about doing?
We've considered it. If you look at the mixed-use building, there's a lot of equipment up there, which sort of breaks everything up. The hotel, certainly we could look at potentially in the future. There's more open space on those roofs, but as far as I know, we would also have to come back for that to get it approved on the roof.
You do, and I can tell you what you already know, which is you got a lot of room on that roof for panels, even with all those condensers. So there is room to do it if you choose to do it. And I think it's important for you to hear from as many of these folks as you can that they support it. So
We have people with wood frame houses that are clawing at the concept to do that, and it is not typically a pretty sight. And here you have an opportunity to do it where it isn't something that we have to have as part of our daily experience, like brushing our teeth. And as you do use up a lot of your roof area, and at least one of the plans that I'm looking at, by spreading your condensers out, but you could pack them into a smaller area. Anyway.
Certainly. I just put 10 kVA on my roof, so I know.
Oh, interesting.
Excellent. Yeah, it'd be good if you designed it to support solar, even if it's not in your short-term plan, because once you put all that stuff down, as you know, it's going to be hard to move it. You won't.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Does anybody have some comments here? No?
I would like to.
Questions?
I'd like to just make some comments. I feel like we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
It's been a long haul. It's been a long process, and I think that
Any
the
changes?
project has gotten a lot better. And the architecture's gotten a lot better. I know we had a back and forth last time about massing, and I say massing's fine. Others say it's not. And the reason I say it's fine is because I'm judging it based on some real criteria that it is one lot. It is a very large lot. It is the north end. There are buildings very similar in scale and height on the north end. But one of the bigger things is that looking at the ratio between the spaces around the building and the height and size of the building, it's appropriate mass-wise based on that, because if you look at Rains Avenue, the distance to the other building is about 1.5 compared to the height of the building. To me, it should be 1-to-1 or even 1.5 in favor of the building to the street, and that would make a much better urban design, a much better use of urban space. And so that's why I'm saying that the massing is appropriate, if not, if not, it could even be bigger. And if you care about sustainability, you put more mass on smaller site. You use more building on less site. So that's why, back and forth with you, Margot, I said it's right. And that's why I feel that way. There's an argument behind it. It's just not just an opinion. So I'm very pleased with where we are at this point. And like I said, it would have been great to follow the vision plan. Unfortunately, that's just not in the cards. So thank you.
Oh, Rich. So, Rich, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the work we've done. We've been working on this. We've had a lot of work sessions, a lot of back and forth. I appreciate all the effort. I appreciate all the listening. I went down there, and it's not the first time I've been walking around there, but I went down and took a walk down there today. Saw the bottles that John didn't pick up back in the day. And honestly, it's been like that for so long, and it was kind of sad to me to think that there is this waterfront in downtown Portsmouth that nobody can use, nobody can enjoy. So knowing with the Greenway project, the North Mill Pond Greenway project, I believe the massing of these buildings fit. I think we've done a good job of rounding that corner down a little bit so it steps into the neighborhood. I even went over to Pahinko Park where you look across and you can see all the colonial homes in the distance, and then if you go to the left, you'll be on the site that we're looking at today. And I truly believe it fits. There's that Vanguard building there right now, and this is going to be a much improvement than that. So I think all this hard work, has been worth it. I appreciate you guys working with us. I appreciate all the ideas, like I said, listening before. But the combination of helping progress that North Mill Pond Greenway Project Park, I've received several letters from numerous residents in town that are very in support of this project, anxious to see it happen, moved here hoping that someone would do something nice with this piece of property. So I'm finally happy to say that I think we're here today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Reagan?
I know that I had brought this up in earlier sessions, but speaking of the buildings that are there now, like the Vanguard building, I'd like to know what is part of this, your plan is to document any of the existing buildings, and if you have an archaeology plan, if you're going to be doing any major excavating, what your plans are for that part of the project.
I think that was covered in the planning board aspect.
Yeah, and I think we did discuss earlier in the project, as I said, Regan, that we would document the existing buildings, photo document.
And what does that entail?
I think we had suggested at the time you might have a scope that you would request, having some experience with that, if you want to stipulate that certain type of documentation be complete, a certain, how extensive might need to be, certainly would be willing to do that.
Land is full.
I think it would be
full of stuff.
I think at the time, I sort of recall this, that we were going to focus mostly on the exterior of the buildings, and create a photo documentation of the 360 of all the buildings. We could also do video, if you like, and then we could do some dimensional, perimeter and height, if that would be helpful.
I think that would be great. I think video is great, but it's a less lasting medium because the technology is changing so much. I think photography is great. I think there's value in photographing the interior of the buildings too, even if they're not very pretty. It still is a documentation of what was there for future knowledge. And so, I think I would love to stipulate that you have good photo documentation of, certainly thoroughly of the exterior, any possible interior shots, and we usually submit it to the city and to the Athenaeum.
And the archaeology.
And the archaeology is a question too, and I don't know how much. I know that you have a lot of. You don't have any underground parking in this, so I don't know just how much excavation you'll be needing to do. But if you run into anything, what your plans are, because there's definitely, obviously, there's modern stuff there now, but there were plenty of historic buildings. You might run into cellar holes or
absolutely.
pits.
I think we'd probably run into some old pier materials. It's a lot of. We have done some test pits out there. There were some underground storage tanks previously removed out there. Cindy Ann Cleaners was previously a filling station.
Right.
So there's been some test pits. I don't think they've found anything historic during those test pits, but certainly if there was something of historical significance, it would be, we'd get an archaeologist involved and document it.
Great. I would like to have that as a stipulation, and hopefully, if you find anything that you could at least make sure that it's available to the public. Like, I don't know if you've been into Jimmy's, but like the little, they have in the stairwell, things that they found in that building
Yeah.
are on display, you know, just something rather than, you can have an archaeologist be there to document it, but then if that's not shared with anybody, it doesn't do any good.
No,
So-
absolutely, and I think the path, the Greenway Trail, there's some great opportunities there for, we have shown some signage out there, but certainly we could add some historical markers. There might be an opportunity to display some artifacts if we find some, and we are, anticipating that we're going to restore that pier as well to make that.
Great, thank you.
So I would just like to say in that same vein, in that little space that's between the gas station, which is Cindy Ann's Cleaners, and the Diamond National Lumber Company, which is a rental property that there should be foundations there for the Boyd Rains house, which was, I think, the largest house in Portsmouth for a long time. And this person just kept making it bigger. So it was like a center chimney that had 3 center chimneys on it. It was an immense house. There's got to be privies and foundations and things there, and that's why we want you to be aware of this as far as the, having an archaeologist. They should check the property first. There should be some test diggings and let you know. I think they did that on one of the projects. Maybe it was Port Walk. So we are going to stipulate that you do have to do some pre-archaeology diggings. I'm not sure that's the proper way to say it.
A survey of sorts, archaeological survey.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and that shipyard that was there, that was one of the largest shipyards. That thing was putting out clipper ships all the time. That was a big shipyard. And you don't have all of it. A lot of it the city's got. So going back to the site again, I'm wondering about how are you going to construct the pier? There has never been any kind of blueprint or anything showing us how you're going to construct this pier. Is it going to have floats, or is it just going to be a viewing pier?
It would be a viewing pier built, sort of reconstructing the existing timber pier that's out there.
So it'll have a railing around it?
Yes, yep.
And the railing would be something that we would need to look at.
Just come back with the pier
Yeah.
when you've got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think we did show that to the Planning Board and Conservation Commission as well. There were some preliminary designs for that, so I'm happy to come back with those.
Yep.
All righty. So is that
Public
it
comment.
for us?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. So any members of the public that would like to speak about this project?
Before I sit down, I just want to say the city model appears to have lost all of our materials. We are not proposing a white building.
Well, thanks for saying that.
Oh.
I don't know why that's the case. It's a massing model.
Hello again, Duncan McCallum, back here again. I'm back here to rebut some of the comments that were made by the gentleman who's representing the developers just a few minutes ago. He says that he and his comrades are entitled by right to build the building that they're proposing, that it complies with all of the zoning requirements, and that they could have built an even bigger building. He obviously does not understand the function of the Historic District Commission, which is that a proposed project, can fully comply with every requirement of the zoning ordinance, chapter and verse, without even having to be bothered getting a variance or a special exception from the ZBA. And yet, if the project is inconsistent with its historic setting, this commission can still disapprove it. Not only may this commission still disapprove it, this commission is supposed to disapprove it. And by this time, I think we've established and disabused everybody on this commission of the notion that architecture is the only thing to be considered, that excessive height and excessive mass are grounds for disapproving it if it causes it to be inconsistent with the historical character of its surroundings, which these buildings which are being proposed plainly are. The gentleman was absolutely wrong in saying that it complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance in the first place. There is litigation going on right now over that issue in the Superior Court. I'm in a position to know because I'm representing about 10 or 15 of the residents who are opposed to it. It is hotly disputed that this project complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and I expect to win. And finally, I will remind you of something that I said a couple of months ago, which is that the planning board granted a request on my part for reconsideration. So the planning board itself is having second thoughts about this project. You may recall, when I outlined the history before, what happened was the planning board approved the project in its December 16th, 2021 meeting. I filed a motion for a rehearing, and then the developers filed a proceeding in the Superior Court and got a stay of all land use board proceedings, at least in the planning board. How and why the court continue to let this board continue to conduct hearings, I don't know. But the proceedings in the planning board were frozen by the court's injunction. But I'm expecting to win that battle too. I'm expecting it to go back to the planning board, where we're going to have a rehearing. So for all of those reasons, please don't be swayed by some of the representations that have been made to you by the gentleman representing the developers, because those representations are wrong. So for all of these reasons and the ones I mentioned before, I urge you to disapprove this project for the grounds that I have mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the public who'd like to speak?
I'm looking. Hang on.
Anyone online?
Yes. Order of operations here. Esther Kennedy. Esther, can you hear me? Esther?
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave, and I just heard what Attorney McCulkin had just said, and I'm in total agreement. You have the right to make a decision about massing. As a previous HCC member, that was our purview. So I encourage you to think about the building. I can encourage you to think about the environmental aspects of it. And I encourage you to save our buffer zones and really think about the step up, which is what we said we were going to do when we did the study of the north end. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bill Downing. Go ahead, Bill.
Can you hear me, Nick?
Yes.
Good evening, Bill Downey, 67 Bow Street. I believe it's absolutely nonsensical to suggest that this is a better opportunity than 10 smaller buildings that would be in the 100-foot buffer zone. I actually called the principal and the lead designer who put those sketches together. They were not done haphazardly. They were done over a week's period, and a lot of people felt very empowered. People that typically don't speak at these meetings at this length of investment is one reason why, but there was a lot of input and it wasn't done in a shoddy way. So I think there was a very inaccurate and poor representation of that. And in essence, this is still too big. I think there's been a good faith effort to soften the corner on Maplewood. But if you look at this diagram that we have in front of us, how can you say it complements the integrity and character of the neighborhood? Look at the beautiful historic buildings on the right. There needs to be an adjustment, step up to the monstrosities that are already there. And so I would just ask you to consider taking it down a notch and continue to soften it. But as it stands now, there's no way a reasonable person can say it's consistent with the historic neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
That's it.
All righty.
May I ask a technical question
Certainly.
of Nick?
Yep.
With regard to the litigations and potential rehearings and all of those things,
Yep.
what impact do any of those have on our decision? If this project is given a certificate of approval here, but then a rehearing happens at the planning board and the planning board rejects it, how does all of that play out?
Well, who the heck knows? However, it really isn't relevant. If the planning board rehears this, and the applicant with the planning board, or the planning board without the applicant, modifies the design of the future decision, if it changes the building placement, volume, or design, it comes back. But we do that all the time.
Okay.
I don't think and the inverse, I don't think you voting on this project has any undue influence on, I would like to think not, on a judge or a jury reviewing a case that has nothing to do with your jurisdiction because you're not under appeal. The planning board is essentially horizontal construction, so they're not a design review board. As much as they might want to be, they're not. They're horizontal construction, you're vertical. So their appeal is more about the buffer zone, because they're the ones that actually approve what the Conservation Commission recommends. And there's more at play in the appeal, and the attorney representing the 12 or 14 or 28 constituents can better state what's in that appeal. But the wetland buffer is a big component, and that has nothing to do with us in relation to this project. If it actually looked like the 10 buildings, it would, because 6 or 7 of them are in the 100-foot buffer. So that's not what we're looking at in front of us, so the wetland buffer has less of an impact on the buildings, which is your jurisdiction, not the berms and the parking and the things that are jurisdictional to the planning board in the buffer. The buildings are not in the buffer. There is a little corner that I believe is in the buffer to the mill pond on the other side of Maplewood Ave, with a 50-foot right-of-way with 40 feet of pavement and a lot of stuff between it and the water that are not on this parcel. So for the most sake, I don't think there's a direct correlation between the two, and if it comes back, it comes back. They're not going to get a building permit because of what you do tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing and look for a motion. And please cite findings of facts and criteria, at least one of each.
I'll make a motion to approve this application. I don't believe we had any stipulations.
We do.
did have
We
the
do.
archaeological.
Yeah.
The flush, sorry, Carly, might have to help me on the flush balcony version, how to word that, what you guys chose. Yeah, give me
Option A.
The A series or whatever, yeah. That the screen design that's on the ground, whatever you're calling that landscape screen, how's that? The mechanical screens on the roof and the pier design, both pier walls and railings, will all come back for administrative approval once the designs have been developed.
Right, the
For all three of those.
mechanicals are represented for what is, expected at this time, but we still have a full MEP process to go through, so we'll be
But they'll
coming
come
back
back
with
for
that.
administrative approval when you're
Of
ready.
mechanical systems,
Yeah,
yes.
for any screening or what screening techniques that you're going to deploy. I think those were the, no, they're not done. You do a photographic documentation of the building's interior and exterior on the site, the 3 buildings.
Correct.
And I thought it might make sense, rather than a pre-development survey or excavation, that the licensed archaeologist be present during excavation at least, so there's somebody there when they're digging that can guide the process.
Or say stop.
Well, yeah, right, have the authority.
Well, I can add a little bit to that. When we did the Court Street project, which was very near the African burying ground, we had an archaeological survey completed prior to any digging.
Well, then let's do
And
that.
sensitive areas were identified, and then when the team is ready to approach those areas, the archaeologist is
That sounds perfect to me.
notified. Yeah, that was the process there.
Right? Yep. So an archaeological survey prior to excavation.
Right, they'll certainly
and
identify the house.
The archaeologist will be available during excavation of those, any sensitive areas.
Okay. So,
Okay, finding of facts, the purpose and intent is to, the conservation and enhancement of property values, and it is compatible with the design of the surrounding properties.
Second?
Okay, there's no other discussion?
Yeah, no, I'll just say that sorry, I should have said this earlier. I just think that there's been a lot of discussion about everything, because we've gone for so long. But I personally, I've gone back and forth with this, but I think that the design has come a long way, and is much more interesting, and it is compatible with the buildings that are there now in the North End. This is what the character of this neighborhood is now. So,
And Dan would like to say?
I think they worked hard, and we worked hard on the multi-use building. So as you come around the bridge and from Maplewood, it terraced nicely. It doesn't overwhelm the old houses across the street. It doesn't overwhelm the pond area. But if you look at 2.2, we've worked so hard on the multi-use building that suddenly, when you come around the corner of that, terraced and nice, and down to 3 and 4, there's this big, huge hotel. And I think slide 2.2 just makes me worry that's too much mass, especially next to 3S and what you have done to the multi-purpose building, that the hotel is too large and too overwhelming. And I'm going to have trouble with that hotel being that huge.
Nobody else would like to discuss?
I think I've spoken my piece.
Yeah, okay. The only thing that I would like to say, and it's not about any particular style or what's going on here, is if I were to look at 50 units going on an acre in downtown, I would rather approve that than 50 units going on 25 acres on Peverly Hill Road or on Middle Street or out and have all the trees cut down. I prefer development in town, and this works along with my ideas. So I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 The chair votes aye.
Opposed?
And opposed?
No.
No.
Opposed?
Opposed. 3 opposed?
3. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Do I get to vote today because Karen's not here?
No, you're both alternates, right?
Right,
Yeah.
so somebody would have to be missing. Got it.
So that's a 4-3 vote, right?
That sounds like
And
it.
that barely made it. But it's approved.
So you have your approval for now. I'm sure it'll be pushed around a little.
Thank you.
Last one.
Is that it?
One more.
Oh, there's one
Oh,
more.
that's
okay,
right.
I'm
We have
sorry.
another one.
Luckily, it's easy.
Yeah.
Are they here? Oh, that must be them. This is the,
Okay, so
Daniel Street.
apologies to whoever had to wait, and that is
44 Humphrey.
Braden and Robin Ferrari, owners for property located at 44 Humphreys Court, wherein permission is requested to allow renovations to an existing structure. This has replaced windows with Green Mountain windows,
That's out now. Yeah.
but I'm going to read that. I've read it. I've already read it.
Yeah.
And the removal of the chimney and the installation of HVAC equipment as per plans on file in the planning department. Said property is shown on Assessor Map 101 as Lot 45 and lies within General Residence B and Historic Districts. Welcome.
Thank you. Jay Pruitt. So yeah, we're going to restore the existing windows. The only thing we're going to add to that, which I guess we can't do that tonight, but the attic space is going to become a bedroom at some point. So we're going to ask for an egress window in the attic space.
You'll have to come back.
Okay, that's fine.
That's what I told him.
Simple.
Okay, and then, so yeah, I'd still like to, I guess you can vote on the chimney and the HVAC equipment.
Questions for the applicant?
So just to clarify, we're just talking about the chimney and the HVAC in the back of the condenser? going in the back? Okay.
Correct.
Just want to make sure.
Can I just say something? Does anybody have anything else to say? So 2 points for me. One is kudos to you guys. Kudos, yeah.
Kudos.
He went back to his client, and they're restoring all the windows as a result of your vote. And I know I told you that by email, but I think similar to the wall discussion tonight, sometimes you win. And it's a hard-fought victory, but I think that's important to remember when you're looking at these applications, and many of you know that, but it's important. The second thing is with the casement window, this was presented to me today as what he had hoped to include in this application. And I suggested he would need to come back, because we don't have any details on that, but that I thought he could do it as an administrative approval, so it's not a new hearing. So I'm hopeful that is supported by the commission. That window could come back even next week as an admin approval, if it's that simple.
It's just a window, it's not putting in a gable or dormers or...
No, you could have the option, they're essentially ganged windows. There's two of them in a little dormer that faces the side of the house, faces the garden. And I could just do one of them, or I could do both of them.
We'll wait to see the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Less
I
is
think-
more usually.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen these done in the Green Mountain. I don't know if you're still going to continue
Yeah.
with the Green
Yeah.
Mountain, so I think we're familiar with that. So if you
Virtually
bring that to
Looks the
us.
same. Double
Very
bunk.
difficult to tell that it's even
Yeah.
casement. So.
Yeah.
It's a really good.
So I think if we could have a better photograph of where that's going to go, since
Yep.
we don't have it in this.
I can do that.
And a detail sheet on that.
Yeah, I sent that to Isaac, and
Okay.
apparently he's out.
We'll
So.
do it next week.
Okay.
All righty, would anybody in the?
Marco.
So
Oh, I'm sorry.
last time we were here, there was some discussion and some question about the chimney. I don't
Chimney.
remember where that landed.
We all
Martin
kind
was
of-
showing support, and I was waffling.
I think we generally all came to the conclusion that this isn't like a chimney to
Character-defining feature, yeah.
Okay,
to
just-
die on.
I don't remember.
I mean, it's not a character-defining feature to the building, in my opinion.
That was my opinion.
It's almost a character-destroying feature. It's like, what? Put it there. So any other
Martin?
discussion?
I'm comfortable.
Nobody?
I'm happy.
There's no one in the public, so I'll close this public hearing.
Wow, this is so easy. This should have led the night. This is the easiest one.
It's been very entertaining.
We have a motion?
I move that we approve this as presented without the windows.
Items 1 and 2. No, 2 and 3?
Just say chimney
2 and
and
3.
Chimney,
mechanical. right?
yeah, the chimney and the condenser unit, and then the fact that any other window changes will come back for administrative approval.
Second?
So all those in favor,
Do
say
you want
aye.
findings of fact?
Yep, findings of fact.
And I want to get out of here too, but.
All right, yeah.
This has conservation and enhancement of property values, and has compatibility of design with surrounding properties.
Sounds good.
That's fine.
Yep, now you can vote.
Okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And against? Nay? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Do we have
Jay.
a motion for
So
adjournment?
moved.
Second.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for being patient, Jay.
Thank you.